Hey guys and welcome back to my channel. This is part 4 of What If Naruto Became a Demon King and Got a Harem. Before we begin, don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and also go and support the author, link in description. Silence reigned in the small room for what seemed like hours. As Naruto listened to the story, he nearly found himself in tears. Were he not as strong-willed as he was, he may have very well cried. He had already known much of what had happened. Kaobi had informed him of everything she knew. But hearing it from his father's perspective really gave the knowledge a more personal feel to it. And that's everything, Minato said. Sarutobi stood from his seat and knelt before Naruto, who had a rather pensive look on his face. With a sigh he spoke. Naruto, I'm sorry. Naruto looked at the old man and frowned. What for? Bawako-chan was my wife. I knew she was the woman to help your mother deliver you, and when she died that day, the anger that I held at her loss, it kept me from doing more to ensure that you were seen as the hero you were as you grew up. I knew it wasn't your fault, but I couldn't bring myself to not feel a bit of resentment, and I'm sorry. I saw your father seal the Kaobi away, condemning you to the life of Jinchuriki, but I didn't know it was because someone else forced his hand. Can you forgive me? Sarutobi pleaded with the youngest ninja among them. Naruto closed his eyes. No. Everyone winced, and as Sarutobi looked down, the blonde continued. Forgiveness is just giving someone permission to do it again. However, I am willing to forget. To leave the past where it belongs, in the past, and to move on. Thank you, Naruto, Sarutobi said as a few stray tears ran down his face. Hey, no problem Oji-san, Naruto said with a smirk. His smirk soon turned into a frown, however, as a thought occurred to him. How did Madara know about the seal? He looked at his father, who was staring at him pensively. I suppose he could have figured out the part about the seal weakening during childbirth. But how did he know I was going to be born? And how did he know the exact time the birth would take place and where? Wasn't my birth supposed to be a well-kept secret? How could he have figured all of that out? I don't know, Minato said. There was a pensive silence for several moments as everyone realized Naruto had a point. There were only a few people who even knew of Kushina's pregnancy. Myself, Bawako, Taji, Sarutobi, the elders. We didn't even tell the Anbu who they were guarding or why, just that it was very important they not let anyone inside. So basically, we've got a serious leak in Konoha, Naruto said. Someone betrayed Ka-san's location and the date of my birth to Madara. But we don't know who. It seems we'll have to be careful and do what we can to root out this traitor, Minato said, looking pensive. We'll start with the elders, since they are the ones who I think would benefit the most from betraying me. At the moment, however, there isn't anything we can do, as all we have is speculation. The Yondaime shook his head and focused his thoughts elsewhere. Naruto, I was wondering if you would be willing to tell us how you got the Rinnegan. Naruto frowned as he looked at the other two, both of whom seemed interested. Very well. You gave us some of the history of the Uzumaki clan. Now I shall do the same. The Uzumaki and Senju clans have always held close ties. They were distantly related to each other. However, what most people don't know is they were also related to the Uchiha, going back to the time when chakra was first being discovered. Their relation to that clan was through one man. You may know him as the Raikudo Sennin. Birth of the new Demon King. Kaobi walked down the hall of one of the many strongholds of the Kitsun clan. The walls of the hallway were a dark beige stone, with glittering candles lighting the area. The floor was also made of stone, but was lined with a crimson carpet that lay along the center of the hall. Other than that, the hallways was fairly barren, lacking the decor that Kaobi usually preferred in the places she lived in to have. Though considering this was more or less the fortress that her clan went to in times of great conflict, niceties like beautiful decoration were pushed on the wayside for functionality. This particular stronghold was a veritable fortress. Hidden within the Yokan Mountains in the northern hemisphere of Makai, the entire base was situated deep inside the very rocks of the mountain and concealed using one of the strongest Kitsun illusions in the world, recharged very 100 years by 16 of the Kitsun clan's most powerful illusionists. Not even a demon on the caliber of herself could see through it unless they already knew this fortress existed. Reaching the end of the hallway, Kaobi came upon a large set of double doors being guarded by two Kitsun with 4 tails. Upon noticing her approach, the duo snapped at attention and opened the doors. Nodding to the two of them, Kaobi walked into the room beyond. The place she had entered was easily recognizable as a conference room. It was large and cylindrical, with a large circular table in the center of the room. Surrounding that table were 12 seats, with all but one of them already filled. At Kaobi's entrance, everyone fell into a hushed silence, the Kitsun present staring at her as she walked to her seat, a large throne-like chair to show her elevated status. First off, I would like to thank Hiseki-san for getting in touch with all of you, Kaobi said, nodding at the old man sitting 2 seats on her left. It has been many hundreds of years since a full council has been called in session. She paused for a second, letting that sink in. It was a subtle reminder to everyone of her power. No one but she could call in a full session of the Kitsun clan council. There are many things that have happened in the last 600 years. As you know, I have been out of touch since I was in the human world. I would like a report on what has happened during my time away. An older Kitsun with 5-tailed stood up and bowed. Of course, Kaobi-sama. Kaobi listened intently as the members of the council gave their reports, a thoughtful frown on her face. It seemed that the two remaining demon kings, Yomi and Makura, were still in a state of warfare, though it had turned into more of a cold war. Only a few skirmishes had happened in the last 200 years, and neither Yomi nor Mukuro had gone into battle in the last 400. That was a good thing as far as she was concerned. With the two still glaring at each other, it meant they wouldn't turn their attention towards her and Naruto, giving her enough time to train Naruto until he was ready to claim his throne. It also meant their forces were weak, since they were in a cold war that meant they hadn't really done any heavy fighting. This was also a good thing because it meant Naruto would be able to gather a large force and train them, and the forces of the two demon kings would be too weak to do anything until Naruto marched on their doorstep. So far they have left our clan alone, deeming that we are not a threat with you gone. Kaobi nodded as one of the older members finished their report. She was just about to speak when another voice called out in question. And perhaps now that you know what has been happening here, why don't you tell us why you left for the human world? Turning her head to face the voice, Kaobi scowled. Yuko, I had not realized you were a member of this council, she said in a dangerous voice. The one known as Yuko, a 7-tailed Kitsun with long white hair and carmine eyes, smirked. I was promoted 400 years ago, when one of our counselors died from lingering injuries. But you did not answer my question. You almost make it sound as if I am answerable to you, Kaobi said in a dangerous voice. She leaked out a fraction of her power, letting the 7-tailed Kitsun know he was treading dangerous waters. That is not what I said at all, Yuko replied calmly, completely ignoring the killing intent. Merely that you were avoiding the question. And I do not believe it unreasonable to ask what our leader was doing in the human world, when she should have been helping lead us. Many of the other Kitsun nodded and mumbled in agreement, though they were not as challenging on the stance as Yuko. Kaobi forced herself to keep an impassive face as she spoke. Very well, I suppose there is no harm in telling you. I left for the human world because I knew that if I stayed, Yomi and Makuro would consider our clan that much more of a threat, and would have made more effort to destroy us. With many thinking I was dead, and our clan being scattered, I knew that at least some of our members would survive. During my time in the human world I began looking for a way for us to reclaim our former greatness. There are many secrets hidden amongst the humans, secrets that could raise our status back to what it had been before, when Raizen-sama was still alive and we were one of the most respected clans in Makai. I see. Yuko seemed to grimace when Kaobi mentioned Raizen. Fortunately he stilled his tongue from talking badly about the man, knowing that the redhead did not tolerate people who spoke ill of the former demon king. And did you find anything that you think can help us? Kaobi smirked. As a matter of fact I did. I found a very powerful ally who could help us regain our lost honor. Someone whose power dwarfs even my own. Silence. The silence in the chamber was so complete you could hear a pin drop. The revelation that there was someone stronger than Kaobi was startling. Very few demons ever reached her level, and the only ones that had were the demon kings and maybe a few other upper S class. Only one person had been able to defeat her in one-on-one combat since she had earned her title, and he was dead. And who is this ally you speak of? Asked Yuko after spending a moment to regain himself. The grin on Kaobi's face was enough to bring shivers to the Kitsun present. The heir of the third throne of Makai and descendant of Raizen-sama himself. Uzumaki Naruto. Birth of the new demon king. Minato couldn't keep the frown off of his face as he sat on a small chair in his son's apartment. The entire place was in short, a complete dump. The former Hokage could not believe his son was even allowed to live in a place like this. When they had first gotten to the apartment, Minato had been surprised to learn that his son was living in the red light district of Konoha. With the Uchiha police force gone, having been killed by none other than Itachi, a fact Minato was still trying to get over, the Anbu had been forced to take over their duties. However, given that they also had to do the most dangerous missions that came in, there were too few of them to do a proper job of cleaning up some of the more scrupulous areas. The Red Light District had been formed sometime after the Kaobi attack due to the lack of forces capable of cleaning it up. And though Minato had no proof, he suspected certain council members may actually be allowing this place to flourish in order to line their own pockets. What made the resurrected Hokage angry, however, was seeing the state of his son's apartment. Just outside of the wall, painted in red paint, which Minato suspected was done on purpose to look like blood, were the words, "Go back to where you came from, monster." That alone had been enough to set off the man, and for the first time in his life, Minato had actually contemplated killing everyone in the village. Only the fact that his son told him not to stoop to their level, did the older blonde relent. The inside of the apartment was just as bad as the outside. Most of the furniture was old and worn. The chair he was sitting on looked like it had been found in a dumpster and cleaned with a hose. It was a mix of patchworked cloth, and when he sat on it he had been afraid it would break. It wasn't just the chair, all of Naruto's furniture and appliances were worn and broken down. The walls were chipped and had paint peeling off of them, the ceiling had large stains where the rain had soaked through. The floors were rickety and creaked when one walked, making it feel like they would break with one wrong step. The bathroom was dirty and had mold growing in the shower, the water heater didn't work, and the place was just an in general mess. Here you go, To-san, Naruto said as he set down a beaten-up looking cup filled with tea in front of his father. The blonde Uzumaki took a drink of his own tea as he sat down and sighed. He was pleased that the clones he had made before leaving the village had been able to get him some proper food and drinks. Looking over at his father, Naruto frowned. You alright, To-san? No, Minato said, his mouth a very thin line. I'm not alright. I can't believe they would treat you like this. Like some kind of monster or a demon, Naruto said with a mirthless smile. But then, you did know how most Jinchuriki were treated when you made me one, right? You knew this was a distinct possibility. Minato winced but held firm. I had thought the faith Konoha's people had placed in me would hold strong, and that they would at least tolerate you. I knew that things would be difficult for you, but I had never imagined that the people I sacrificed myself for would treat you this badly. Most leaders aren't capable of thinking the people they lead could commit such atrocities, Naruto said sagely. They wouldn't be leaders otherwise. If you don't have a deep-seated love for the people to the point that you can willingly place blind faith in them, how can you effectively lead them? A chuckle escaped Minato's mouth. You seem to have a wisdom beyond your years, Naruto. I just see things as they are, Naruto replied with a shrug. In truth, all of this started with Uchiha Madara. I can't blame the people of Konoha for being scared and angry, and I can't blame them for their initial wariness of me. However, I can and do blame them for not even taking the time to get to know me. I can blame them for passing on their hatred to their children, and I can blame them for the life I've had to live for the last 13 years. These are choices they made, and while they may have been a byproduct of Uchiha Madara making Kaobi attack the village, it still doesn't give them the right to do what they did. No, it doesn't, Minato agreed. What do you plan to do? I still plan on becoming Hokage, Naruto said after a moment to take another sip of his tea. Not for the people of Konoha, but for Konoha itself. The blonde took a moment to compose his reasoning before continuing. Konoha was once a great village, its shinobi were widely respected as some of the best while under the guidance Senju Hashirama, its people once loving and kind. While it wasn't perfect, as it was a shinobi village and still committed many atrocities against its enemies, it was probably the most idealistic place to live amongst all the hidden villages. However, all that changed. I can't say when, as I have not been alive long enough to know that. But I suspect it was after Shodai-sama died. He was the heart of this village, and with his death I don't think Konoha ever truly recovered. It was a slow process, but this village became an ugly place, filled with greed and hatred. No longer being guided by the Hokage, the council has almost total control of all civilian affairs. And many shinobi ones too, I suspect. You're right, Minato said. When I first became Hokage, I could see how many on the council acted. It was only my feared reputation that kept many of them from publicly acting against me. However, I had always suspected that they were committing illegal acts on the side. Money laundering, smuggling, drug dealing, subverting my shinobi forces on false pretenses. I have no actual proof, other than a few dead ends and false trails, but I know that many on the council have been corrupted by greed and the power their position offered. Which is why I'm going to change that, said Naruto. I plan on fixing this cesspit of a village and bringing it back to its former glory. Truth be told, while Naruto felt respect for the Konoha of old, the current village held no place in his heart. Were it not for the fact that there were a few people he considered precious that he knew would not leave it, and were it not for the fact that he was more or less using Konoha as a testing ground for his leadership abilities, Naruto would have left and let this place die, rather than restore it to its former glory. Then I'll be sure to help, Minato said, getting his son to look at him. The former Hokage grinned at his son. I have faith that if anyone can change this place for the better, it's you. Thanks, To-san, Naruto smiled. He was still a little unsure about his father, not in any negative way. However, he just wasn't sure what sort of relationship they should have. The blonde Uzumaki had been forced to grow up very quickly, his innocence and youth had been irrevocably shattered when he ran afoul a drunk villager for the first time. The front he had put up in front of everybody, that of the happy and ignorant child with a penchant for trouble, had been unknowingly crafted in order to keep his mind from breaking. With the unlocking of his demonic side, that front had been wiped away, leaving behind the scarred but emotionally strong adult that Naruto had been forced to become. He didn't have any real need for a father, he had raised himself, and his time growing emotionally was over. His ways were set and he had no need for the guiding hand of a father. Still, Naruto felt hopeful that he and his father could have some kind of bond, but it would have to be a friendship of equals. Of brothers, not of father and son. While Naruto was thinking about what it meant to have a father, Minato studied him. It was rather interesting to see the combination of himself and Kushina in Naruto. The blonde had a mixture of his and Kushina's face. He had Minato's eyes and jawline, but his mother's nose. However, the former Yondaime Hokage could also see areas where his son was completely his own person. Namely, the fangs that protruded from his upper lips and the fact that his fingernails were slightly clawed like an Inuzuka's. Naruto, do you mind if I look at the seal? Asked Minato. You want to look at the seal? Asked Naruto guardedly. Why? Well, I just noticed that you have some, interesting features. And I wanted to make sure it wasn't due to the Kyuubi's influence. Naruto sighed. He had known this would come up, but had been hoping he could put it off. Oh well. About the seal, I think there is something you should know. You see, Kyuubi is no longer sealed inside of me. In fact, the seal no longer exists. What? Minato asked calmly, as if he had not heard right. There are some things I didn't tell you in the Hokage's office, because they are private and I don't want anyone else to know yet. I would ask that you keep any thoughts and comments to yourself until I'm finished, okay? He paused and waited for his father to nod before continuing. Now the first thing I believe I should tell you is that Kyuubi didn't have any intention of destroying Konoha that night. When she was released from Madara's control, her original intention was to leave. However, she couldn't do that with the Konoha shinobi attacking her. I am sure you know the instinct of any sane person, be they human or demon who is being attacked, is to attack back. And that is exactly what she did. I won't go into details because you know the end result of those actions. I have already listened to her side of the story, and know many things about her that no one else knows. I know that while she wouldn't care if Konoha burnt to the ground, she wouldn't care if it didn't either. I know she is not evil, and I know that while she hates humans she won't attack unless she is attacked first. Because of that, I let her out of the seal. Naruto lifted his shirt and began channeling chakra through his body. Minato's jaw dropped as he saw, or didn't see, the Hake Fuin appear on Naruto. But that would kill you. Minato shouted. And yet it didn't, Naruto said calmly. His words had the effect of calming Minato down, who grew thoughtful and was no doubt trying to figure out why Naruto hadn't been killed by releasing the Kyuubi. Where is Kyuubi now then? In Makai, Naruto answered, getting Minato to blink again. I have her currently gathering her clan, so that when I return to Makai I will have an information network and the basis of an army. Minto gaped at what his son was saying. Naruto actually laughed at his father's expression. This brings me to my next point. We are not fully human. I don't know much about your family name, but we are descended from a very powerful demon called Raizen, who was one of the 3 demon kings of Makai, and the most powerful of all 3. Raizen was a very powerful form of elite demon called a Mazoku, which loosely means tribe of devils. It was said that he was capable of destroying the entire world 7 times over. He died around 600 years ago, after falling in love with a human woman. You see, Raizen needed to eat humans to survive, and when he fell in love with her, he felt that he was unworthy of her affection because he ate humans. He left her after making a vow to never eat another human again until he saw her. However, he never did see her again, she died in childbirth before he could return to her. Yet he kept his promise, he didn't eat a single human being ever again and died of starvation 1,000 years later. We are descended from his child. That is the reason for my changes. When I was in the Forest of Death for the second stage of the Chunin exams, Orochimaru did something to block the effects of the Hake Fuin. This in turn unlocked my demonic heritage which had been sealed by the Hake Fuin and made stronger by Kyuubi's Yuki. Because of that I am now 2/3 RDS demon, and why I look older than my 13 years of age would suggest. To say that Minato was shocked was a very mild way of putting it. Hearing that he and his son were descended from the most powerful demon to ever exist, who was said to be capable of destroying the world 7 times over, was astonishing to say the least. However, you know, that actually makes a lot of sense, Minato said as Naruto finished explaining everything he knew. I have always been physically more capable than others, stronger, faster and better able to both deal out punishment and take it than a human should be capable of. While your mom may have said I looked girly, my physical abilities had always surpassed those of my peers. That was actually why I am the only one capable of using the Hiraishin. Naruto raised an eyebrow. Why is that? Because unlike what most people think, the Hiraishin is not a reverse summoning jutsu or any form of true Jikuken jutsu, Minato said with a smirk. It is a speed jutsu that allows for near instantaneous movement using the seal of my kunai as a marker. And when I say instantaneous, I do mean that. It allows me to travel at the speed of light by opening a rift in space and time, which I can move through. That's far faster than anyone else can ever hope to be, and that kind of speed would crush a normal person. That sounds like Shundo, Naruto muttered with a frown. It sounded like Minato had found a way to use Shundo, despite not having much demon blood in him. Naruto knew the only reason he had so much Yuki and demonic properties was because Kyuubi's presence had enhanced and strengthened his own demonic blood. Which was slightly ironic because when she had been sealed inside of him, Sita had his demonic heritage. That Minato could use Shundo, even as heavily modified as his version sounded, was impressive. Minato blinked as he hadn't quite caught what his son was saying. Huh. Nothing. I'll tell you later, Naruto replied. So, if your jutsu's not a Jikuken jutsu, then how were you able to block a Bijudama? Minato cracked a grin. It's a special Kekai ninjutsu that I combined with my Hiraishin. Basically, I opened the rift, but instead of going through it myself, I sent the Bijudama through it instead. Makes sense, Naruto muttered after thinking the theory on how such a technique would work over. It sounded useful, and he could help but wonder if it would be possible for him to use Shundo in such a way. The younger blonde decided to switch topics and began telling his father about the many pranks he had pulled within the village. Needless to say, Minato was impressed that his son was able to prank the Anbu and clans in Konoha. They reminded him of Kushina when she used to prank the village, only his sons were on a much grander scale. Though it wasn't so surprising when he thought about it, wasn't the new generation supposed to pass the old one anyways? A knock at the door interrupted their conversation. Opening it up revealed a female Anbu with long purple hair and a Neko mask on her face. Can we help you? Asked Minato as Naruto looked at the woman before smiling. Hey Neko-chan, how are you doing? Neko turned to look at Naruto. I'm doing alright, she replied in a soft alto voice. Naruto frowned when he noticed the slight tremor, but didn't get a chance to comment on it as Neko spoke again. The council has requested a meeting you with, Yondaime-sama. The council requested? Minato asked, eyebrow raised. I was not aware the council could request anything, it is not they who control the shinobi forces. Neko shuffled her feet unsurely. I am just a messenger, Yondaime-sama. Right, Minato sighed, is Sarutobi aware of this? Yes. Very well, tell him my son and I will be there in a few minutes, Minato said, closing the door on a stunned Neko. The older blonde turned to look at Naruto. What do you think? Naruto blinked as his father asked for his opinion, but shrugged his slight surprise off a second later. I think the council is getting too big of a head, their egos are becoming large enough that I don't think they'll fit through a door soon. Perhaps we should help them deflate those egos. A smirk crossed the blonde Uzumaki's face as a plan began to form in his mind. So here is what we'll do. Birth of the new Demon King. The two blondes were walking side by side as the doors to the council chamber opened. The council chamber was designed much like a courtroom. Raised up on a dais was the Hokage's seat, currently occupied by a rather harried-looking Sarutobi Hiruzen. On chairs in front and slightly lowered were the three elders. Shimura Danzo, a old frail man, who would normally walk with a cane. He had black shaggy hair, and his right eye is kept bandaged. Danzo has had an X-shaped scar on his chin ever since his youth. He wore a white shirt, with a brown robe over top of it covering from his feet, to just over his right shoulder. Minato knew this man was well known as a warhawk, and had a much more militaristic view on how the village should be led. He was also the former commander of Root, and though Minato had no proof, suspected that Danzo was still leading Root from the shadows. Udatane Kaharu, an old woman with her hair pulled back in a twin bun locked by a traditional Japanese hairpin with two pearls dangling off the side. She was wearing a simple long kimono, closed by an obi, a jacket, and a sash over it. And the final member was Mitokado Homura, a man with gray hair, a beard, glasses as well as a constant frown that he always wore, even in his youth. He also has a strong jawline, a facial structure he had managed to retain even in his old age. His outfit was similar to the robes of the Hokage, only without the red lining, hat, or the kanji on the back. To their left was the Shinobi Council, which consisted of the clan heads, and the current Sotaicho captain commander of the Anbu. Minato recognized many of those in attendance, some who had been the head of their clan when he had been Hokage, and others who had not been. Of those seats, only one was empty, the seat for the police force, which had been controlled by the Uchiha. And to the other side was the civilian council. Seeing them here caused Minato to frown. During his time he had managed to separate the civilians from the Shinobi Council, as their presence wasn't needed for anything ninja-related. That they were here meant they had managed to entrench themselves in power during the chaos of the Kyuubi attack's aftermath. As he and his son fully entered the chamber, everyone became silent. At least until one of the counselors spoke up. What is he doing here? A man Minato didn't recognize asked with a sneer as he pointed at Naruto. Minato's frown grew more prominent. Do you have a problem with my son, Counselor San? He asked. The expression, silent enough to hear a pin drop, wasn't just an expression after those words left Minato's mouth, it was a literal description of how silent the council chamber was. Son. One of the members on the civilian council managed to stutter out after getting her voice back. Minato looked at the woman and nearly cringed at the bright pink hair she had. Seriously, who had pink hair? Did you think I would be willing to use anyone else's child to seal the Kyuubi inside of? Asked Minato. It was a completely rhetorical question, merely designed to make the people in the chamber think. And think they did. For the shinobi side of the council, those who had known and worked with Minato, everything now made sense. It was well known that the man known by many that the Kuroi Senku never did anything without a good reason, and would never willingly ask someone else to make a sacrifice if he was not willing to do so himself. A few of those in attendance were cursing themselves for having not realized it. How could they have missed the signs? Naruto in many ways looked exactly like Minato, even when he had been a chibi, right down to those ridiculous spiky, golden locks and bright blue eyes. For the civilian side, they were not thinking about how stupid they were. No, they were now feeling a form of fear. It was well known how horribly they had treated Naruto, and it would not be hard for Minato to find that out, if he had not already. If he found out how they had treated them, they were sure it would not bode well for them. Fearful mutterings broke out amongst the civilians. A tapping on a cane soon brought all speaking to a halt. Everyone turned to the only man who would get people's attention that way, Shimura Danzo. Perhaps we should get to the reason we called you here, Minato-san, the old man suggested. Though if everything went according to plan, this man's ability to disrespect him would be blunted. Minato resisted the urge to scowl at the man, not at all liking the disrespectful tone in Danzo's voice. However, there was very little he could do. He was not Hokage anymore, and since he had died, he couldn't even be considered a shinobi of this village. Very well, why exactly have you called me here? Sarutobi was the one who took the reins for this. I was speaking with the council, and we were wondering what your plans were, now that you have been returned from the dead. I plan on spending time with my son, Minato said. I have 13 years to make up for, and I plan on making the most of the time I have here. Would you consider reclaiming the Hokage title? As soon as the Sandame's words were uttered, chaos reigned. There was much shouting going on from the civilian council, many of them protesting Minato's return to the position. The clan heads were talking excitedly to themselves. It was obvious they, at least, were happy with the prospect of Minato's return. The elders, meanwhile, were scowling at Sarutobi, who had obviously ruined whatever plan they had concocted. Minato waited until Sarutobi managed to get order back into the council chambers before speaking. To be honest, I'm not sure why I should. His words caused a ripple of shock to spread through the council chambers. I gave much for this village. I sacrificed blood, sweat and tears in its defense. I killed many foreign ninja to keep it safe. I sacrificed myself and my son for the sake of Konoha and its people. And the only thing I asked for in return was that my son be treated as a hero for keeping your sorry asses safe from destruction. And what happened to that request? That very simple request, and the only thing I ever truly asked of my people. You spat on it. You completely disregarded my dying request. You showed me dishonor by not having confidence in my sealing. You showed me that you never truly respected me by treating my son like some kind of disease. Everyone was shocked into silence at the Yondaime's angry exclamations. If words had the power to physically harm people, everyone within the chamber would have been turned into nothing more than ashes at the sheer amount of anger in the man's voice. It was becoming very clear to them that Minato was not happy with their treatment of Naruto. That's not true. One of the civilian council members shouted. Do not lie to me. Minato roared, his voice actually forcing the council member to recoil back in his seat due to fright. I've seen the dump my son lives in. I saw the writing you people put up on his walls. You people disgust me. Naruto is the greatest hero this village has ever, or will ever see. Because unlike Kaobi's previous Jinchuriki, he did not choose to house it, it was forced on him. Previous Jinchuriki? Questioned Sum, who was the only one currently capable of speaking right now. Are you telling me that there has been more than one Jinchuriki for the Kaobi? Behind his father, Naruto smirked. This was going to be good. Yes, as a matter of fact there have been two others, Minato said, his voice calming down. Only the few who knew Minato well could hear the mirth in his voice, the kind he had when he was about to drop a bombshell. The first was none other than Uzumaki Mito-sama, the wife of Shodai-sama. Minato paused, letting that thought sink in and watching with satisfaction at the many faces that paled. And the second was none other than Uzumaki Kushina, my wife. Silence. The silence within the council chamber was defining in its absolution. No one spoke. Many dared not even breath as these two revelations came crashing down on them. The wife of their beloved Shadaime Hokage had been the first Jinchuriki for the Kaobi, a woman who was more loved than any other, almost more loved than Hashirama himself. While Senju Hashirama had been considered one of the founding fathers of Konoha, Uzumaki Mito was its mother. To hear that a woman who was so respected, so loved by the people of Konoha, was a Jinchuriki for the Kyuubi no Yoko was a complete shock. Worse still, they had just learned that Minato's own wife was a Jinchuriki. While Kushina was not as loved as Mito, she had been a widely respected figure. Her battle prowess as a shinobi was as legendary as her temper. Many knew that she and the Hokage had gotten married, though they did not know she had been with child. The shock that they had unknowingly insulted not one, but the wife of two Hokages was enough that many were rendered completely and utterly speechless. However, attention snapped to Minato once again, who was tapping a finger to his chin. While I personally don't know if I care for this village as I once did, I do know that my son is a member of its shinobi forces. And though Sarutobi has done his best to rule of Konoha after my death, he is well past the age where he should be retired and allowed to enjoy life with his grandchild. Therefore, I will be taking up the position of Yondaime Hokage once more. Once more pandemonium set into the council chambers, with the shinobi side ecstatic and the civilians angry and fearful. You can't do that. Everyone winced at the ear-splitting screech of the pink-haired councilwoman. And why not? Asked Minato. Because you were already Hokage, the woman said as she attempted to think of a reason the Yondaime could not reclaim his position. And you died, so you can no longer be the Hokage. That is where you are wrong, Minato said with a thin, somewhat malicious smile. It was an odd look for the normally placid man's face, and many people who saw it shuddered. You see, before I died, I never passed on the hat to my successor. Sarutobi-san took up the position because there was no one else to do the job. But it states in the village charter, created by Shodai-sama himself, that, until the Hokage passes on the hat to another, he shall remain Hokage. So you see, councilwoman, because Sarutobi, who was my successor, has given me the okay, I am Hokage. Birth of the new Demon King. It had only been a day Minato was renominated as the Yondaime Hokage of Konoha, yet much had changed in that small amount of time that made it feel like a lifetime to Naruto. So much had happened in such quick succession that it left the blonde's head spinning. During the coronation, or re-coronation, as it were, for the Hokage, the population had given joyous cheers at the sight of their Yondaime Hokage alive and taking up the position once again. Many could not help but feel that everything was going to be better now. They may have just been in a war, but now they had their Yondaime back. That joy and jubilation lasted until Minato then spoke of how disappointed he was in them. Many people after that had been shocked. They couldn't help but wonder, why was their Yondaime disappointed? What had they done wrong? After the initial shock had worn off, the people had begun whispering to each other, attempting to figure out why their beloved Hokage was so disappointed in them that he would actually express it in a speech. Then Minato had dropped the bombshell. Naruto was his son. There had been rumors, of course, started by the many people who had seen them together. Most of the ones claiming Naruto being the Yondaime's son were shinobi, the ones who had seen the two on the forefront of the invasion. The civilians, of course, had not believed them, and said it was because the Yondaime was controlling Kaobi through the seal. Now those people who had scorned Naruto not only felt ashamed, but also afraid. They had treated the son of their hero like dirt. Worse still, Minato had given them the same speech he had the council, informing the people that two of Konoha's most powerful and well-loved female figures were in fact, the Kyuubi's previous Jinchuriki. This, coupled with the blonde's disappointed, sent many into despair, and others into denial. His speech had an even greater effect on the younger generation, those who had been told to hate Naruto but were given no reason. Now they knew, and their trust in their parents, grandparents, and anyone old enough to know Naruto was a Jinchuriki had been shattered. Many of Konoha's youth had turned away from their parents after that. A rift had opened between the older and younger generations. The problem the older generation was that none of the children and teens who had been taught to hate Naruto had any real reason to hate him. Now that Naruto was not only the son of Minato, but also the hero who held back the Kyuubi, they were no longer listening to the words of their parents and elders. The only ones who weren't as affected by the announcement to such a large extent were those who knew Naruto best, even if that wasn't very much comparatively speaking. The Ichirakus had not cared that Naruto was the son of the Yondaime. It did not change anything about their relationship. To them, Naruto was and always would be their number one customer. The now famed Rookie Nine were a group that had varied effects. Most of what they felt was shock. They had always made fun of Naruto when they were younger, calling him loser, dobi, and picking on him for being a clanless orphan. To hear that Naruto was not only the son of the Yondaime Hokage, but also somehow related to the wife of the Shodai was a kick to the figurative balls for them. Many didn't know what to think. It was almost impossible for them to come to terms with what they now knew. Naruto was practically royalty. Only two members of the Rookie Nine didn't care, Uchiha Sasuke and Haruno Sakura. For Sasuke, all he felt was anger at hearing that the dobi was more special than him. He felt like Naruto was trying to take his rightful fame and glory away from him. Who cared if the idiot was the son of the Yondaime and related to the wife of the Shodai? Sasuke was an Uchiha, a clan far more famous than some stupid Hokage and the woman of a two-bit clan. Sakura simply thought Naruto was trying to make her Sasuke-kun look bad so she would go out with him. Not that it would ever work. Naruto was an idiot for thinking that she would ever date him just because he was the son of the Yondaime. As far as she was concerned, Naruto was still an idiot. In the days that followed, Suna had confirmed that the Cage had been killed, after finding the man's corpse in the desert, not even hidden from view. They had sent a delegation led by Baki and Tamari to renegotiate the contract for their alliance. Minato learned that the reason for their desire to see Konoha hurt and its reputation destroyed was because of their former alliance with the Hidden Leaf Village was sucking their economy dry, especially since the K's daimyo was sending more missions to Konoha than Suna. With that new knowledge, an alliance contract was hashed out quickly. 80% of all K's no Kuni missions had to go to Suna, and 20% of missions in High no Kuni would also go to Suna as a show of trust. It was a better deal than the smaller village could have hoped for, and they were more than happy with it. It was actually a good thing for Suna that they switched sides at the last minute. Had their forces actually fought Konoha, then Minato would not have been so giving. It was a time of change for Konoha. The Yondaime was back and not exactly happy with its people, and Naruto was now known to be the son of Konoha's greatest hero. However, many couldn't help but wonder, with how poorly people had treated the blonde Uzumaki, was the change coming to Konoha for the best? Birth of the new Demon King. How about another bowl, Oji-san? Naruto said as he stacked the now empty ramen bowl on the rather large tower of empty bowls. Ha ha ha, coming right up. The owner of the ramen stand, Ichiraku Chuki, said with a laugh. Ayame, help me get another bowl ready for our favorite customer. You got it too, San. Ayame said as she began helping her father make the food for Naruto. Said blonde leaned back in his seat as he thought about the past few days. He wasn't really sure if he liked the direction things were heading for him in Konoha. Sure, many of the citizens were being nice to him, praising the son of the Yondaime, and thanking him for protecting them from the Kaobi, but he knew they were only doing that because of who his father was. While Naruto had always wanted to be respected, he wanted it because he had earned it, not because his father was the Hokage. He finally understood how Konohamaru must feel. To be honest, being praised because of who you were related to sucked just as much as being hated for something you had no control over. Here you go, Naruto-kun, Ayame said as she placed a new steaming bowl of ramen in front of him. Naruto snapped out of his revelry and gave the pretty ramen waitress a grin. Thanks, Ayame-chan. You're the best. I don't know about the best, Ayame said, blushing in embarrassment. Naruto just grinned as he began slurping up the delicious noodles. Watching the blonde for a second, the ramen waitress regained her composure and set her elbows down on the counter, resting her chin in the butt of her hands. So is it true that you killed Orochimaru? Naruto slurped up a mouthful of noodles and swallowed before answering. Yep, I ended up getting in a fight with him and killed while Toussaint was fighting Nadaime-sama. I always knew we're something special, Ayame said with a grin as she ruffled Naruto's hair. Said blonde pouted at her action, which caused her grin to widen and a small giggle to escape her. She was pleased to see that even with all of the changes he had gone through, both physical and mental, Naruto was still more or less the same kid she used to know. It was while Naruto was on his 50th bowl, having already broken his record by 20, that an Anbu appeared beside him in Assumption. The ninja, wearing a bear mask, looked at the rather precarious stack of ramen bowls, a sweat drop forming on his head. Uzumaki-san, Hokage-sama wishes to speak with you. Naruto nodded, pleased that the shinobi wasn't one of those simpering fools who referred to him as Sama, or worse, honorable son. Tell my old man I'll be there in a second, I just want to finish up my food, he said, finishing up his bowl. The Anbu nodded and left in a puff of smoke. Standing up, Naruto stretched his body out and let out a satisfied sigh of content. He threw some money on the table before, leaving an extra large tip and tossed off a salute. See you two later, he called as he began to leave the stand. But before he could get out of the door, his path was blocked. Naruto blinked several times as he saw himself looking into the light brown, pupilless eyes of Mitarashi Anko. She was staring at him with a very serious expression, and Naruto was not at all sure what she was doing here. He had not had any real interactions with the Tokubetsu Jonin, aside from the time she had cut him with a kunai and then licked his blood. Not normally a best first meeting, but now that Naruto's full heritage had come out, he would freely admit her actions had kind of turned him on. Can you help you, Mitarashi-san? Asked Naruto. His answer was for Anko to actually lunge at him. Naruto prepared to defend himself but became surprised when the woman's lips smashed against his. For a second, the blonde froze, his mind trying to comprehend what was happening. However, once his brain caught up with the world around him, Naruto closed his eyes and leaned into the kiss. He might not know what the hell was going on, but that sure as hell didn't mean he wasn't going to enjoy it. He was kind of surprised. Anko's kiss was very clumsy and unsure. She didn't seem to know what she was doing. Which, considering the way she acted, was not what the blonde Uzumaki had expected. This left Naruto to take over the kiss. Even more surprising was that as the kiss continued, his cheeks began to get wet. Naruto opened his eyes to see that Anko was crying as they kissed. Not sure if he had done something wrong, or if there was just something wrong with the woman he was currently in a lip lock with, he broke the kiss. Hey, are you okay? He asked. He hoped his kissing wasn't so bad that she was crying. Anko's answer was to bury her face in his neck, muttering, "Thank you," over and over again. Naruto, confused and unsure, did the only thing he could think of. He wrapped his arms around the crying woman and held her tightly. Birth of the new Demon King. Naruto entered the Hokage office to see that several people were already there. His father was seated behind the Hokage desk, a stack of completed paperwork at one end. Beside him were Hiruzen and Jiraiya, who were currently helping him get settled back into his position by updating him on the recent history he had missed. What surprised him were the other people in the room. Shikamaru was currently standing in front of the desk with a bored look on his face. He would yawn every now and again, looking for all the world like he didn't want to be there. Beside him was a woman he didn't know. He recognized her as an Inuzuka due to the traditional fang-like tattoos of the Inuzuka clan on both of her cheeks. In addition to that, she had a tattoo on her upper right arm that resembles a flower. Her outfit consisted of a form-fitting variation of the Konoha flak jacket, the differences being that it didn't have any front pockets and she was keeping the front of her jacket unzipped, exposing her bust. She also wore a pair of form-fitting shorts cut just above the knee. The one thing that surprised Naruto was that she had a softer appearance than the other members of her family, not having extended canines or slit-like eyes, and spiky hair, but tied into a neat ponytail with bangs framing each side of her face. The final member of their group was Aburame Shino, who was standing near the Hokage's desk completely silent. "You're late," Minato said with a frown. While he wasn't all that worried, Naruto didn't seem the type to be late. He couldn't help but wonder what had held his son up. "I ran into Anko," Naruto said, shrugging as he entered the office more fully. "She wanted to thank me for killing Orochimaru." He had actually been forced to take Anko to his apartment, as her crying on him had started attracting a crowd and she was too busy bawling her eyes out to inform him where she lived. It had taken nearly 15 minutes for her to calm down, and that was only because she had cried herself to sleep. He still wasn't sure what to make of her reaction to her former master's death. She seemed overjoyed, and yet he was sure somewhere deep inside of her, she was also hurt. "I'll bet she did, Gaki," Jiraiya said with a lecherous grin. "Jiraiya, I swear if you make any sexual connotations towards Anko, I will castrate you and ram you cock up your ass," Naruto said in a serious tone. While her actions before he got here were confusing, he could recognize when someone's had a bad life on sight, which was why he was feeling protective towards her despite not actually knowing her. He could tell Anko had it tough, and he would be damned if some pervert made any untrue comments about her. Jiraiya paled, both at the threat, which was not only rather creative and something he had never heard before, but also very violent and unpleasant sound, as well as the tone of Naruto's voice. His tone was calm, almost conversational, like he wasn't threatening someone. That kind of tone was often used by people who really would go through with their threats. "I have several reasons for calling you all here," Minato began, ignoring the way Naruto had threatened his sensei. As far as the older blonde was concerned, Jiraiya deserved that one. "First things first, Nara Shikamaru, congratulations on your promotion to Chunin." "Troublesome," Shikamaru muttered as he was presented with a sealing scroll that contained his Chunin flak jacket. Minato cracked a smile at the Nara heir. "I expect you to live up to the title of Chunin." He turned his attention to Shino. "Aburame Shino, congratulations on your promotion to Chunin. While you did not get a chance to participate in the exams, it was well noted by instructor Yumino how you had come to the academy and helped defend the student population." "Thank you, Hokage-sama," Shino said, accepting the sealing scroll with his usual zeal and enthusiasm. Meaning he didn't have any, because Shino had all the emotional responses of a robot. "And finally, Naruto," at his name the blonde straightened. "For not just showing your prowess and ability in the Chunin exams, but also for beating both the Ikibi no Shukaku's Jinchuriki and fighting and defeating Orochimaru of the Densatsu no Sanin, I hereby grant you the rank of Tokubetsu Jonin." It was the highest promotion Minato was able to give his son, as gaining the title of Jonin required one to take the Jonin exams. Otherwise he would have been promoted straight to Jonin. "You've earned this." "Thanks, Sama," Naruto said with a grin. Minato rolled his eyes as he handed Naruto his scroll. "And now for the other reason you all are here," Minato continued. Everyone, even Shikamaru, straightened at his words. "I have a mission of the utmost importance for you. The four of you, under the leadership of Uzumaki Naruto, are to find and bring Senju Tsunade back to Konoha." Birth of the new Demon King. In a dark cave a dull violet light pulsed and throbbed rhythmically, illuminating a massive statue. The statue was of an upper torso and head with two arms held in front of it, palms raised and fingers curled up. Its wrists were shackled, there was a bit in its mouth and a blindfold over the upper part of its face. From under the blindfold multiple eyes could be seen, each one was currently closed. Standing on the statue's fingertips were 8 outlined figures, their eyes being the only distinguishable feature. "Why did you have to us?" The disgruntled question came from a man whose outline revealed that he had spiky hair and a large bandaged object on his back. "We're less than a day away from Konoha. There has been a change in plans, Kisame," another man said. This man had spiky hair as well, in a more messy style. However, the most distinctive feature about this man that could be seen were the eyes. Gray sclera and iris with purple ripples spread out from the center. I want you to hold back on capturing the Kaobi until reinforcements arrive. What? Why? Sasori will be able to better explain the situation, the Rinnegan-bearing figure said. The one named Sasori, a hunchback-look figure, said. Initial reports were a bit sketchy, given that Konoha was recently invaded by Oto and Suna. However, we have now been able to confirm that the Kyuubi Jinkyuriki was the one who killed Orochimaru. So, Orochimaru was a chump, Kisame said. We all know he was the weakest of us. It has also been confirmed that the Yondaime Hokage was returned to life via a kenjutsu that Orochimaru cast. Silence met that statement. However, the Rinnegan bearer had one more piece of news for everyone there. It has also been confirmed that the Kyuubi Jinchuriki has some kind of variation of the Rinnegan. Well, shit, Kisame said. Therefore, you and Itachi must wait until reinforcements arrive. Hidan and Kakazu will be going with you too. Also, you must not attack the Jinchuriki while he is within Konoha's walls. Between Jiraiya, the Yondaime, the Sandaime, and the Kyuubi Jinchuriki himself, none of you would stand a chance. Then how do we get him? Asked a figure with glowing red eyes that held 3 tomo. Our sources indicate that the Kyuubi Jinchuriki has left on a mission to search for Senju Tsunade, replied Sasori. So we wait until he's far enough away from the village that he can't call for help, then we attack. Asked Kisame. Yes. One by one the silhouettes flickered out until only 3 were left. The spiky-haired ring-eyed man, another man with a mask that had a swirl-like pattern that converged on the right eye, and the only woman of the group, her hair decorated by a single paper rose. Be sure to capture the Kyuubi Jinchuriki quickly, the man in the swirl mask said. If he does indeed have the Rinnegan, he will become a problem to us later. Do not concern yourself, Madara, the man with the Rinnegan said. He is still new to those eyes. He won't be able to use them to their full potential for years. Let us hope you are right, Madara said before disappearing. Are you sure this is the best option, Pain? Asked the woman with the flower in her hair. If he really does have the Rinnegan then. There can only be one god, Conan, Pain said. And it is not him. Come, we have much work to do in order to prepare for the extraction. After a few seconds hesitation, Conan nodded and both figures disappeared, leaving the room empty save the giant statue. Birth of the new Demon King. The Raikage of Kumogakure read over the report with a large frown. He was a very large, muscular man with slicked back white hair and a small mustache. He was wearing his cage hat and robe without a shirt underneath, allowing others to see his Hulk-like physique. Each wrist had a gold bracelet with protrusions sticking out of them. Mabui, he called out as he finished reading the report his subordinates had just sent him about the latest Chunin exam held in Konoha. What he had read was extremely disturbing, and would need to be dealt with immediately. The door opened and in walked a young woman with dark skin and green eyes. She was wearing very formal attire, consisting of a long-sleeved, high-collared dress shirt and skirt, along with a pair of long earrings and sandals. She had her light gray hair pulled back into a bun with 2 bangs that fall on either side of her face. Yes, Raikage-sama, she said. I need you to get me Samui. Tell her I've got a mission for her of the utmost importance. Mabui blinked at the seriousness and agitation in her leader's tone. However, she was used to her cage's quirks and rashness and just nodded. Of course, Raikage-sama. As Mabui left, the Raikage went over the report one more time. Uzumaki Naruto, you will be trouble if I don't deal with you soon. Naruto was sealing some of the items he felt he would need into a sealing scroll when he heard a light groan. Looking over at his bed, he saw Anko beginning to stir. He watched as her eyes fluttered for a second before shooting wide open. The perplet shot off the bed and instinctively reached for her kunai pouch, which was not there as Naruto had taken it off of her when putting her to bed. Her eyes soon landed on said blonde Uzumaki and widened. Naruto. Hey, he greeted with a half smile, half grin. Are you feeling all right now? You were pretty distraught when I brought you here. Anko blushed bright red as she remembered her actions, which she would half admit was caused by mass amounts of sake and the other half being genuine gratitude. Though if Naruto were to learn those thoughts he would assume the sake had more of an influence on her. Sorry about that, she scratched the back of her head sheepishly. I was a little, drunk when I spotted you. Don't worry about it. It's not like I didn't enjoy the kiss, Naruto said with a grin. He watched as Anko looked away. Though I was a little worried for a moment there. I thought you were crying because my kiss sucked. Well I wouldn't know. That was my first kiss, Anko admitted with embarrassment laden in her voice. Naruto blinked. Really? That's surprising. He was even surprised that she would tell him. Oh, Anko gained a tick mark on her forehead but kept her face otherwise calm. And why is that? It's just that you're so beautiful I thought you would have men lining up to be with you, Naruto told her honestly. Anko, who had been angry just a few seconds ago, thinking Naruto assumed she was some kind of slut like everyone else, snapped her mouth, which had just opened to spew expletives at him, shut. It took her several moments of silence to process Naruto's words into something she could understand. When she finally did, she looked down at the ground. Why you think I'm beautiful? Naruto frowned at Anko's actions. They were very different than what he had expected of the strong and frightening kunoichi he had met before the second stage of the Chunin exams. She seemed so unsure of herself. He had more or less figured out that her public personality was more or less an act. Some of what she showed others were real enough, but the blonde was sure that most of what people saw was simply an act she used to keep others away. Despite this, she looked a lot more unsure of herself than he would have expected of a jonin. Why wouldn't I think you were beautiful? Naruto said, answering her question with another question. Anko looked at him for a moment before seeming to regain her usual attitude. She quickly laughed and said, well, of course I am, right? I mean, I'm the great and sexy Mitarashi Anko. You don't need to act around me, Anko-san, Naruto said, causing her laughing to trail off. I know what it's like to be discriminated against by the village. So don't think you need to pretend around me. Anko's feet began playing with the carpet when she looked down. I suppose you would, huh? She looked up at him and grinned. Though you're something of a hero nowadays. Yeah, because of my 2-san, Naruto said with a snort. They don't actually like me, but because I killed Orochimaru and my old man expressed his shame in how they treated me, I'm treated differently. However, I'm not Sasuke, so I'm fairly indifferent to their ass kissing. Anko snickered at his words and Naruto grinned. Listen, I've got a mission, so I've got to get going. But I was wondering if you wanted to hang out sometime after I get back. What do you mean? Like a date? Asked Anko, looking at him curiously. If you want, Naruto shrugged. I was just thinking of hanging out, but we could do a date too. He grinned and winked at her. You certainly won't find me complaining about taking such a beautiful young woman out to dinner. Anko shook her head, partly in amusement and partly to hide her blush. You're a lot different than what I remember from you, Gaki. You do know I'm 11 years older than you, right? You say that like age matters to me, Naruto said. He pointed to his headband. I'm wearing this, aren't I? That means I'm an adult in the eyes of the village. Actually, it didn't matter to him because he wasn't human. As a demon, and one with above S-class power, he was immortal. Raizen himself had been nearly 4,000 years old before he died, and he would have lived longer had he not made that promise to never eat another human. The fact was, when you became timeless, age meant less than nothing. The blonde grinned at Anko. Besides, do I look 13 to you? No, Anko said, shaking her head. She smirked at him. You'll have to tell me why you look so much older than you did a month ago. Maybe later. For now I've got to head out, Naruto said. You don't need to bother locking the door when you leave. I don't have anything of value in here anyways. You're just going to let me stay here? Asked Anko, her eyes widening slightly in surprise. Naruto shrugged. You can leave anytime you want, but I don't particularly care if you stay either. Anyways, I'll see you later, Anko-san. That's Anko-chan to you, Gaki. Anko shouted after Naruto as he left the apartment. The infamous snake mistress of Konoha looked around at the apartment. It was clean, but rather trashed, likely from years of abuse and break-ins. It certainly wasn't a place someone like Naruto deserved to live. Hopefully the kid's father would be able to get him a nicer place. It would be a shame to come to this place every time she wanted to see Naruto, and she was beginning to like the kid. Birth of the new Demon King. Naruto arrived at the north entrance to see that his team was already there. He looked at the three of them. Hana was standing at the ready. She had 3 dogs with her, all 3 of whom had stiffened at his presence. Shino was standing under a tree. There was a slight buzzing sound coming from his insects, which Naruto noticed also had much to do with his presence. The only one missing was. Where is Shikamaru? Asked Naruto as he looked around. Right here. Everyone turned to look down the road to see Shikamaru wearing his usual outfit, only with the Chunin jacket added on. He yawned and stretched his hands above his head, his perpetual lazy and bored expression on his face. Let's get this troublesome mission over with. Were it not for the fact that Naruto had more or less expected this response from the lazy ninja, he would have rolled his eyes. In a minute. First off, I want a dissertation of your skills. I already know most of yours, Shikamaru. However, I never really saw Shino in action, and because Kiba didn't really put up much of a fight in the prelims, I know next to nothing about Hana-san here. Shino. As you well know, I am a member of the Aburame clan, Shino began, pushing his sunglasses up his nose and causing them to flash in the sunlight. I rely mostly on my Kikaichu beetles in combat. My main style of combat relies on me being several moves ahead of my opponent and boxing them in with my Kikaichu, then draining them of their chakra so they can't fight. I am also versed in several of my clan techniques, such as the Mushi Bunshin bug clone. So you're mainly a long-distance fighter who relies on chakra-eating insects and strategy, Naruto stated after hearing everything Shino said. Correct. Hana, said Naruto, turning to the last member of his team and the one he knew absolutely nothing about. Right, Hana stood at attention. Like everyone else in my clan, my style relies heavily on my clan taijutsu and our special attacks. I always fight with my partners, the Heimaru Senkyodai, 3 Heimaru brothers. I'm also a vet, and have some basic experience in medical jutsu and medicine. How good are you at healing humans? Asked Naruto. Not very, Hana admitted. I specialize in dogs, though I do know a few medical techniques for humans. I wouldn't be able to heal anything more than superficial wounds. Naruto nodded, having expected as much when he asked that, but felt the need to confirm. Being a vet meant she specialized in helping animals, not humans, and there were differences in anatomy and genetics she had to account for in her techniques. Meaning the jutsu she used on dogs and cats wouldn't work if she used them on a person. Alright, you all know our mission, Naruto began. We are to find and escort Senju Tsunade back to Konoha. Hana, we're going to rely on you and your ninja dogs to find Tsunade. Jiraiya-san only gave us a basic heading on where to go. Right, Hana said with a nod. I'll need something of Tsunade-sama's in order to find her. I've got something that Jiraiya-san gave me, Naruto said, holding out a scroll. We'll wait until we're in town however, as I don't want the scent to possibly get ruined by our own scents. When Hana nodded, Naruto looked at his other 2 teammates. Shino, we'll also be relying on your bugs to search out any powerful chakra signatures. When Shino nodded, the blonde Uzumaki turned to the final member of his team. Shikamaru, I want you to create several contingency plans in case Tsunade decides to bolt. From what Jiraiya-san told me, it's a very likely possibility with her. Sounds troublesome. He trailed off at the look on Naruto's face, which more or less said, unless you want to experience untold amounts of pain, do as I say, and hurriedly added, but I'll do it. Good, Naruto said, clapping his hands together. Our first heading is Otofugangai, where Jiraiya-san's spy network last reported Tsunade being seen. We'll be traveling fast, so it should only take a day for us to get there. Now, let's go. After checking out with the gate guards, Naruto and the others walked out and jumped into the trees. As they began traveling to their first destination, Naruto found his mind on Kaobi. She had yet to return to him, and while he was not worried as he knew she could take care of herself, he was beginning to miss her. Sighing, he refocused on his mission. All he could do was hope she would return soon. Birth of the new Demon King. Minato had just finished his paperwork for the day when the 2 members of the Elder Council, Danzo and Hyuga Hiyashi, entered his office. Minato looked up to see them all there, nodded in greeting. I'm glad to see you've all come so promptly, he said, indicating several seats next to Sarutobi and Jiraiya, who had been with him since the morning. We have much to discuss. The 3 retired ninja, and 1 clan head all sat down, wondering what they had been called for. Udatane Kaharu, Mitokado Homura, as of this moment I am firing you from the elder's position on the council. 6 sets of eyes widened to his statement and Minato was hard-pressed not to smile. Your positions will be taken by Jiraiya-sensei and Hiyashi-san, with Sarutobi-san as its head. You can't do this, Kaharu exclaimed, shock clearly evident on her face. We have been the elders on the council for decades. Which is why it's time for you 2 to retire, Minato said calmly, having expected this response. You've remained in power for too long, and I think you've gotten too comfortable with the position. I have another job I want the 2 of you to do. Many of our shinobi do not understand the politics that run a village. Therefore, I am making it mandatory for all shinobi of Chunin rank and up to learn about the political arena, both in our village and in others. You 2 will be teaching in seminars once a month until all of our shinobi understand politics, and then again when we get a new batch of Chunin. You will be continuously paid for an S-rank mission for doing this, allowing you to keep your comfortable lifestyles. And I can do this, you forget that I am the Hokage. This village is a military dictatorship with the Hokage in charge. All decisions on how this village is run, and who is helping me run it is up to me. Not you, or anyone else. If you cannot accept that, then I will have to forcibly retire you. He left the threat hanging in the air, forcing the 2 elders to concede defeat. Satisfied, Minato dismissed the 2 and turned to Hiyashi. Aside from your new job as acting elder, I also have a proposition for you. Yes, Hokage-sama, Hiyashi asked with a raised eyebrow. I am going to be rebuilding the police force that the Uchiha clan once controlled before the massacre, Minato said. I wish for the Hyuga to be in charge. Hiyashi's eyebrows rose to his hairline, and for the first time in his life, surprise was shown clearly on his face. Minato held back a smile at getting emotion to show on the normally stoic man's face as he continued. While the Hyuga will be in charge, this will not be a solely Hyuga-operated program. Your clan will be working closely with those of the Inuzuka and Aburame clans, who have always worked well with the Hyuga in tracker squads. I have already created a basic outline of what I want. However, should you feel the need to make changes, do not be afraid to do so. I want you to look the plans over, and in 1 month come back with any changes you have the structure of the police force. Afterwards, you will have 5 months to implement the new police force into the inner workings of Konoha. Is this acceptable? Hi, Hokage-sama, said Hiyashi. While it was hard to tell with the man's stoic face, he looked exceedingly happy. The man left a few moments later and turned to Danzo, who looked at stoic as ever but had a sense of curiosity about him. Minato looked at Danzo for a few moments, remembering what Naruto had told him about the man. Birth of the new Demon King. Flashback. It had only been a few minutes after Minato's first meeting with the council, and after getting his anger at his son's treatment in Konoha off his chest, the newly reappointed Yondaime was feeling much better. With him were Naruto, who was sitting down on the couch looking relaxed and comfortable, Jiraiya, and Sarutobi. Well, I think that went well, Sarutobi said at last. You managed to leave the council flat-footed. Good, Minato replied. Hopefully I will be able to take them even more off guard in the months to come so I can implement the changes I want without interference. He had many changes he wanted to make to Konoha, several of which were actually ideas he had gotten from Naruto, who was a fountain of innovation and change. Some would not be able to be implemented for years, but a few were ones he could do now. However, his thoughts on what he wanted to change about Konoha were derailed as Naruto spoke. That old man with the bandages, that was Danzo, right? He asked. Yes, Sarutobi said, curiosity evident in his voice. Why do you want to know? He is hiding something, several somethings in fact. What do you mean? Asked Minato with a thoughtful frown on his face. As you I've told, with the Rinnegan I can see and analyze chakra. While I do not have the 360-degree vision and ability to see Tenketsu as the Byakugan, or the copying abilities of the Sharingan. With the Rinnegan I can see chakra at its base forms. Danzo has a powerful chakra hidden in his right eye, and there are 10 chakra spots on his left arm, though they are not as powerful as the one in his eye. I don't know what they are, but they remind me of the chakra I see when looking at the Sharingan Kakashi and Sasuke possess. This caused the 3 older ninja to look pensive and startled. Minato decided he would need to make plans in order to force Danzo into revealing himself in a way that implicated him in a treasonous light. He began to make plans on what to do about the known Warhawk, either to make use of him, or hang him by the proverbial throat. Flashback end. Birth of the new Demon King. I am reactivating the Black Ops program root and placing you at its head. Began Minato, surprising the elder man enough that it actually showed on his face. That was of course what he wanted, to leave Danzo off guard and off balance. He and the old Warhawk never saw eye to eye on how the village should be run. Much like Senju Hasarima, Minato believed in trying create peace amongst the shinobi villages. While Danzo believed in using fear and war to subjugate the other villages. They had argued many times in the past when Minato had become Hokage. That was what likely had the older man so surprised. Of course, I've known even before my death over 13 years ago that it was still active. Despite the fact that Sarutobi had ordered you to disband Ne well over 3 decades ago. However, I am willing to forgive this transgression and not have you executed for treason if all of my conditions are met. My first condition is that I want to know who you have working for you, therefore you will give me a roster of all NE operatives both past and present on my desk within the next 24 hours. Secondly, I want a complete overhaul of your program's training. No longer will NE operatives be emotionless robots incapable of independent thought. I need them to have a full range of personalities and the ability to switch as needed. They will be working closely with Jiraiya's spy network to go undercover in other hidden villages that we are still hostile towards. We will give them authentic passports to enter other countries under an assumed name, and they will have to take on multiple identities to suit our needs. They will be our first line of defense, taking care of any problems we might run into long before these issues ever reach our doorstep. You're talking about a complete overhaul of my training methods, Danzo said slowly once Minato had stopped talking. Such a deviation from my original training will take time, and the older recruits will be very hard to re-educate. Which is why I am giving you 3 years to accomplish this, Minato said. Also, I want it made clear that you will no longer be recruiting children, all members of NE will be Chunin and higher. If you want someone, send me a list of those you feel have the potential to be in NE and I'll decide whether or not they should go there. You will report your progress to the Hokage each month. I will also be doing a personal checkup of my own, just to make sure you have not deviated from my design. What about funding? Asked Danzo. You still have over 100,000 ryo from the funds you've been leaking from the treasury, Minato stated, enjoying the look of surprise on Danzo. The man likely thought since Sarutobi never noticed he wouldn't either. It was clear this man forgot just how good at intelligence gathering and reading between the lines Minato was. Truth be told, it had not been hard for him to have Sarutobi pull up the money spent from the treasury and discover the trail Danzo had leaked. Of course, it could have been someone else, the money trail had led to a dead end. But considering the reaction he just got, it was safe to assume Danzo was the one leaking funds. You'll start with that. If you need more funds, then we will discuss that at a later date. Hearing the dismissal in Minato's voice, Danzo left. Are you sure that was a good idea? Asked Jiraiya. If what Naruto said was true and he is hiding several Sharingan eyes on his body, then it means he has not only committed a crime against a clan, but also has been experimenting on bloodlines, possibly even using the work Orochimaru had here before leaving Konoha, Minato said, interrupting his sensei. Or it could be possible he was working with Orochimaru, Sarutobi pointed out. While he didn't want to think his old friend would do such a thing, the now retired Sandaime knew that if Danzo thought it was for the good of Konoha he would not hesitate to do it. That's also possible, which is just another reason to keep an eye on him, Minato said. Even as the Hokage, I can't just arrest someone on groundless and baseless accusations. While I may be in charge, people still have rights and I still have rules that must be followed. I can't just say that my son saw chakra hidden by a couple of bandages, and there is no proof other than a similarity in chakra that what he has hidden are Sharingan eyes. Also, by giving my permission to reactivate Ne, I am making it so that he can't do anything without me knowing. When you told him to disband the program, he didn't, and it allowed him to go underground because you trusted him to do so. During that time he was able to entrench himself in the village, and his actions were those of a ghost. With this, I can keep an eye on him and ensure that should he make a wrong move, I can finish him off. If you say so, Jiraiya said with a shrug. He knew that Minato never did anything without a good reason, so if his student thought something was a good idea, then it probably was. And while Danzo is digging his own grave, I want you, Sarutobi-san, to keep an eye on our two former elders. If they were the ones who gave away Kushina's birth to Madara, I want to know. Of course, Sarutobi said with a smile. Now that I'm more or less retired, it won't look so suspicious when I go and visit them to see how they are doing and spend time reminiscing about old times. Thank you, Minato said. He then turned to his former teacher. Now, Jiraiya-sensei, you were saying something about a possible threat to my son before the others came. Jiraiya's expression morphed into a form of seriousness that looked out of place on the normally jovial Gamma Senin's face. Yes, I've uncovered a threat, not just to your son but to all Jinchuriki. They are calling themselves Akatsuki, Red Dawn. Birth of the new Demon King. Otofugangai was a very lively place, Naruto decided. The town looked much like any other town, filled with shops, bars and restaurants. There were people walking up and down the street, enjoying the day, window shopping or just spending time with their friends. Stalls lined the street, each one filled with food or games or some other form of entertainment. Parents were taking their children to some of these stalls, buying them ice cream or some other sweet treat, letting them play a game where they had to use a net to catch a goldfish. Naruto even saw a shuriken throwing game that some of the older kids and young adults were playing. There was a lot going on, and Naruto was glad that he had two people who specialized in tracking, otherwise finding Tsunade would prove to be very difficult. Uzumaki-san, Shino said after having moved up to his side. The Kikaichu that I left in our path have picked up 4 powerful chakra signatures. Naruto didn't bother looking at Shino as he kept up his charade at looking at all that was going on around him as he said. What can you tell me about them? One of them is very powerful. In fact, the most powerful signature I can sense is more powerful than all 3 other signatures combined. Another feels odd. It feels like there are 5 different chakra signatures. I'm not skilled enough to tell more than that. The other 2 are contrasting with each other. One of them is very controlled, refined would be a good word. And the other is chaotic, violent. The blonde Uzumaki nodded as he asked, and how far out are they? At their current pace, they will be entering the city in 10 minutes. Okay. Naruto stopped, forcing the other 3 to stop as well. Change of plans you two. It seems we're being followed by several powerful ninja. I doubt they are friendly, so here's what we're going to do. I want you 3 to continue on as normal. Go to every bar, motel, casino and gambling parlor in town and see what you can find on Tsunade. Meanwhile, I'll go and deal with this new threat. Are you sure that's wise? Asked Hana. I mean, wouldn't it be better if all of us came with you? Not in this instance, Naruto said, shaking his head. Whoever is following us aren't your average, run-of-the-mill ninja. I'm likely going to need to go all out, and my techniques are destructive. I'd be just as prone to hurting you guys as I would them. Fighting sounds too troublesome anyways, Shikamaru said with a yawn. So I'll leave it to you. Just try not to die, otherwise your old man is gonna give us a lot of troublesome grief. I don't like it, Hana said, but I also know that you killed Orochimaru, and you are in charge. I shall have some Kikaichu monitor your situation, Shino said. As we are a team, we will step in should you find yourself in trouble. Naruto nodded. That's fine, though I don't think I'll need help. Focus on getting information on Tsunade for now. I want to have her either located, or if she's not in this town I want to know where she went. The 3 gave Naruto a quick, hi. before heading out. Sighing, the blonde began walking around town again as if nothing was wrong. Birth of the new Demon King. For several seconds, Minato said nothing as he looked at the nervous Jonin in front of him. Hitaki Kakashi, he began at last, looking at a file on the man who had at one point been his student. Jonin Sensei of Team 7, ever since I heard about you being a Jonin Sensei, I have had your files pulled up. I must confess to being disappointed in the way you've handled your team. The silver-haired Jonin's lone eye widened, but he was given no chance to speak as the Yondaime continued. From these files I have come to the conclusion that you have been negligent in your duties as a Junin Sensei. We shall start with a review of your mission to Nami no Kuni, Wave Country, which started off as a C-rank guard and escort mission. After finding out that the client had lied about the mission parameters, you failed to take in your student's safety first and decided to press on with the mission. Even after facing off against a member of the Kiri Shinobugatana Nananan Shu, and having the mission upgraded to an A rank, you refused to back out of the mission. In your arrogance you also failed to even call for backup, which you know is the standard procedure when continuing with a mission that is beyond the current level of the team sent. And after your confrontation with the Demon Brothers is something that would have been simple for you thanks to your summoning contract with the dogs. Despite knowing the danger, you continued the mission where you faced the Kurigakure no Oni, Demon of the Hidden Mist, Momochi Zabuza, and would have been killed were it not for the quick planning of one of your students. Even after this lucky break you once again ignored protocol and refused calling for backup, which would have undoubtedly arrived before your second confrontation with Zabuza. It was only after all of this when you finally decided to teach your students tree climbing, which they should have learned 2 weeks after graduating from the academy. Your actions nearly cost you 2 members of your squad during your second encounter with Zabuza to Haku, who only lost that battle due to Naruto accessing the chakra of the Kaobi, a dangerous situation as he had not had any instruction on how to properly use it. As it is, only his strong will and sense of moral stopped him from succumbing to its power. After this mission you continued along this road for until it came time for the Chunin exams, and ignored 2 of your students so you could focus on Uchiha Sasuke after his Sharingan's manifestation via private tutoring once the other 2 had left. Because of your inaction in their training, both Naruto and Sakura were woefully undertrained. As I understand it, Naruto still had trouble with his chakra control, due to the vast reserves given to him via the Hake Fuin leaking Kyuubi's chakra into his chakra coils. Rather than help him and Sakura, who was floundering due to a lack of motivation to train, motivation which you should have provided, you left them in favor of a single student. Despite knowing of these problems and not doing anything to fix them, you nominated your team for the Chunin exams without giving them any warning or time to train for it. It was only thanks to Naruto activating a bloodline having long since been thought lost on my family's side that the 3 even managed to make it past the second stage. Then as soon as the preliminary rounds were over you disappeared on your genin without a word to them so that you could once again privately train the Uchiha. Not only that, but despite Sasuke having received Orochimaru's Juinjutsu, which combined with his already unstable personality made him a very dangerous person. You taught him exclusively, without even bothering to check in on your other students. Naruto got lucky, having already had a training plan in place and didn't need your help to do it. However, Sakura, who was the weakest on your team, was left behind. I must also consider the fact that you allowed Uchiha Sasuke to copy what you knew of the Goken, which you yourself copied from Maida Guy. On top of that you went ahead and taught nature manipulation to a genin so that he could learn the Chidori, which he then proceeded to try and use on his teammate after learning that he had been disqualified due to your tardiness. Throughout the entire meeting, Kakashi had slumped down further and further as he listened to Minato berate and bring him down. Finally, after Minato appeared to be finished, he asked, "Do you have anything to say in your defense?" No, Kakashi admitted, his shoulders slumping even further. Minato sighed. "I'm disappointed in you, Kakashi. I thought I taught you better than that, but it appears you learned nothing in your time with me. Nor did you learn anything from Obito." He saw his former student wince. "I can't overlook these issues. Not only does everything I've read show a lack of foresight, it also shows a blatant amount of favoritism and lack of leadership abilities. Because of this, you are going to be placed on a 6-month probation, and afterwards you will have to go through thorough testing to see if you truly have all of the qualities we look for in a jonin." "But sensei." Kakashi gulped at the look Minato gave him and corrected himself. "Why Yondaime-sama, what about Team 7? As it is, Team 7 has been officially disbanded," Minato said. "Naruto has already been promoted to Tokubetsu Jonin due to his feats in the Chunin exams and his victory over 2 very powerful ninja, one of which was S-ranked. Sasuke on the other hand will be getting a full psychiatric evaluation by Yamanaka Inoichi. Should he prove to be unstable, his chakra and Sharingan will be sealed until he can prove himself able to use his talents and skills correctly. Also, as a form of reparation, you will make a list of every jutsu you know and submit it for documentation. 30 of those jutsu will go to Naruto as a form of reparation for willful neglect." Kakashi just nodded. He was beginning to feel rather numb. For but a moment the world around him went out of focus as the ghostly forms of his deceased teammates materialized in front of them. Both held a disappointed look. Even worse, he could see the image of his father looking just as ashamed of him. The forms vanished the next second, however, and Kakashi was left standing with his newly revived former sensei. And Sakura. From what I've seen of her files, Sakura should have never even become a genin, Minato said coldly. She may have intelligence, but she lacks everything else, and that brain of hers seems to leave whenever Sasuke is involved. If she wants, she can re-enter the academy, but I won't have a girl who doesn't train, doesn't work, and berates one of her teammates in my ninja force. Kakashi nodded once before disappearing in a puff of smoke. Minato closed his eyes and sighed. I'm sorry to do this to you, Kakashi, but it seems you still have hard lessons that need to be learned. Birth of the new Demon King. Naruto spent nearly an hour walking around Otofugangai pretending nothing was wrong. He spent some time eating the local cuisine and playing a few of the games. Being a ninja, and one blessed with the luck of a fox, Naruto won every one of the games he played. Not having much need of them, the blonde gave quite a few gifts away to some of the kids he found that weren't having much luck. Finally deciding enough was enough, he bought a stick of dango and began walking out of the city proper. It didn't take long before Naruto reached a decent-sized park that was just on the outer limits of the city. Finishing up his dango, he swallowed before calling out, "Are you four gonna stay hidden, or do I have to blow this place up before you four come out of hiding?" Four figures appeared within the clearing Naruto had selected for his battleground. The first one Naruto laid eyes on was the guy who looked like an older Sasuke. He had black hair that hung near his cheeks to frame his face and kept the rest of it in a ponytail, which was later obscured by the high-collared black cloak that had red cloud designs on it. There were, however, a few differences between this man and Sasuke, aside from the age difference. Sasuke had very pale skin, while the man before him had a slightly darker tone of skin. However, the two most distinguishing features for Naruto were the long pronounced tear troughs under his eyes, and the eyes themselves. They were red with 3 tomo in each eye. The Sharingan. So the rumors really are true, this Gaki does have the Rinnegan-like leader Sama. Naruto's attention shifted from the man with the Sharingan, who could only be Itachi's older brother and the one who massacred the Uchiha clan, to look at the guy directly to his left. He very tall and fairly muscled shinobi. He had a distinctive shark-like appearance, complete with pale blue skin, small, round white eyes, gill-like facial markings under his eyes, gills on his shoulders and sharp triangular teeth, a trait that reminded the blonde of Momoichi Zabuza. He also styled his dull blue hair in the form of a shark fin. He was wearing the same cloak as the other three, with the only differences being the large object he had on his back and the Kurigakure headband with the slash running through it. Who the fuck cares? Let's just grab this little shit so we can go. Bad enough I can't sacrifice his ass to Jashin-sama, said a man with had medium-length silver hair slicked back with distinctive purple eyes. Cloak open with no shirt, only pants under it revealing his Yugakure forehead protector around his neck and Jashin amulet. He also wore dark green nail polish and his orange Akatsuki ring on his left index finger, which bears the kanji for 3, san. He had a rather large triple-bladed scythe on his back. Shut up, Hidan. No one wants to listen to you complain or listen to you spout your mouth about your stupid religion. The last member was a dark-skinned, muscular man that towered over everyone in Akatsuki with the exception of Big Blue, as Naruto called him. He wore a hood and a black mask, with his eyes being the only visible part of his face. His eyes have an unusual coloring. Green irides, no pupils and red sclera. Aside from his cloak, he wore the forehead protector of his home village with a scratch in the middle which symbolized that he was no longer loyal to it. He also wore dark green nail polish and an Akatsuki ring with the kanji for North Bay, Hoku, was placed on his left middle finger. Oh fuck you, Kakazu. Shouted Hidan, I'm sick of fucking listening to your shit. Fucking, money-loving prick. If you keep bad-mouthing Jashin-sama, I'm gonna fucking send you to hell. Even hell runs on money, Kakazu said, I'd be just fine. As amusing as it is to watch two grown adults act like a bunch snot-nosed brats, Naruto said, interrupting the duo before they began. I'm gonna have to ask that we get the ball rolling. To be honest, I'm glad you four came here. You see, I haven't had a good fight in a long time, since I killed Orochimaru anyways, but even he couldn't give me the challenge I've been craving. I hope you four do better. Hey, listen to this brat, Itachi, the blue-skinned man said. He grabbed the handle of the object he was holding and pulled it off his back, setting on his shoulder as a smirk graced his features. He thinks he actually has what it takes to defeat us. Come with us, Naruto-kun, Itachi said. Failure to do so will only make this harder for you. Naruto chuckled as he felt chakra invade his coils. I hope you don't think genjutsu of this level is going to work. He unleashed a torrent of his yuki and destroyed the illusion, along with the second one that had been woven into the first. It was a little trick Kaobi had shown him. While his chakra control was not good enough to dispel a genjutsu higher than AB rank, his yuki could, even if he hadn't had decent control over it. I'm feeling a little insulted by your pathetic attempt at genjutsu, Itachi. I think I should show you just why it's a bad idea not to go all out on me at the very beginning. Blurring in a burst of speed, Naruto shot towards the four missing nin. Only Itachi was able to get out of the way in time, thanks to his Sharingan allowing him to see Naruto's movements with perfect clarity. The other three were not so lucky as the blonde appeared in between. Kisame ended up getting a double fist to the chest, while both Kakazu and Hidan were smashed in their respective faces. All three were sent flying backwards. I'm not surprised you managed to evade me, Naruto said as he looked behind him towards Itachi. Those damn monkey marbles of yours are annoying. You are very fast, Naruto-kun, and quite strong, Itachi complimented. However, I would suggest you give up. You do not have any hope against all four of us. Hey, so you say. Naruto said with a smirk. You little shit, Hidan shouted as he got back up and charged the blonde. I'm gonna fucking murder your ass. Naruto turned to look at Hidan, who was closing in and swinging his scythe like a madman. Naruto's sweat dropped at how uncoordinated the guy's attacks were. It was like he just fought without any thoughts on what he would do next. The blonde really hoped that wasn't how Kaobi told him he fought. Holding out his hand, Naruto called out, Shinra Tensei. An invisible force smashed into Hidan, forcing him to once more go flying backwards. Naruto didn't have any time to admire his handiwork though, as two masks, one that looked like a demonic tiger, and another that took on a strange four-legged body with wings came at him. Kaden. Zukoku, fire release. Intelligent hard work. Futon. Atsugi, wind release. Pressure damage. The lion mask fired a small fireball, which erupted into a literal firestorm as it struck the ground. It burned everything in its path as it came towards Naruto. Meanwhile, a tornado was released from the four-legged mask. It combined with the fire jutsu and created a massive firestorm nearly 5 times as large as the one that had been struck by the wind. Naruto waited until he could feel the heat from the flames of the firestorm, then made liberal use of Shundo and escaped the attack with ease. Reappearing several meters away, he took a second to compliment himself on his choice of battleground. He was far enough away from the city that it wouldn't take any damage from his battle. That was good, he didn't need civilian casualties. Looking around for a mere second, the blonde Uzumaki spotted and charged his closest opponent, Uchiha Itachi. Said ninja only noticed just as Naruto appeared before him, and if the widening of the man's eyes were any indication, he was surprised. That did not stop him from preparing for their first close-range encounter however, and Naruto and the Sharingan user began trading several blows. Their fists and feet were mere blurs as they fought, both of them launching attacks left, right and center at each other. You're good, Naruto said with a grin as he launched several quick as lightning kicks, switching from high to low at random. Itachi dodged or redirected each one, using his Sharingan to keep up as he soon found Naruto was faster than him. Really good. Way better than Orochimaru. Itachi didn't speak as he finished dodging Naruto's last kick, then launched several quick strikes with his fists. None of them reached Naruto as he dodged each one fairly easily. However, before the blonde could counterattack, Itachi jumped back and sped through a set of hand seals, Kaden, Gokaku no Jutsu. A large fireball was launched from Itachi's mouth. Naruto held up his hands as the fireball came in. Fujutsu Kyuin, blocking technique absorption seal. The fireball touched Naruto's hands and began to shrink as he absorbed the chakra into his body. It didn't take long before the entire technique was gone. Once Naruto finished absorbing the fireball, he pointed his hands at Itachi, palms up. Shinra Tensei. The repulsion attack smacked into Itachi, who was sent flying back. However, when he hit the ground, Itachi was covered in a burst of smoke and was replaced with a log. I've got you now, Gaki. I'm gonna sacrifice your ass to Jashin-sama. Naruto looked on either side of him to see Hidan and Kisame charging in, one with his scythe and another with large object. Naruto frowned as he charged Yuki into both hands. When the two swung at him, Naruto lashed out, striking the two weapons with his hands and unleashing a blast of Yuki. A powerful blast was launched from each fist, the reddish-black energy crackling in its intensity. The scythe melted as Hidan was sent flying back with a loud scream of pain. The bandages on the large object were shredded, revealing a sword. Or at least, what Naruto assumed was a sword. The thing's construction was atypical in that its actual blade was comprised from a series of downward-facing scales running along the entirety of its length until its hilt, at the base of which is a small skull. When Naruto's Yuki blast hit the sword, a loud screech was heard from it. The sound being emitted reminded the blonde of a dying beast. What the hell? Shouted Kisame as his sword began to chip and vibrate. The blue missing ninja's face became much more pale as he listened to his sword's pained shrieks. What the hell kind of chakra is this? His chakra hurt Samahata. Naruto smirked. This is no ordinary chakra fish bait, he said. My chakra is so potent that it's poisonous to anyone and anything. That includes the overgrown sack of scales you're carrying. Why, you little shit? Kisame roared, losing it as he charged at Naruto. However, While Kisame had some speed, he was nowhere near as fast as Itachi, who was still slower than Naruto. Said blonde moved in quickly, utilizing Shundo to appear directly in front of Kisame. Reddish-black energy appeared crackling along his hand as the demon shinobi created a knife's edge. He plunged the hand directly into Kisame's chest, only for Kisame to burst into crows. Ha! Genjutsu! Naruto broke the genjutsu over himself, and saw that his entire field of vision was another firestorm of epic proportions. The blonde grit his teeth, the jutsu was much too large for him to absorb with his current skill. He wouldn't be capable of taking in such a large-scale attack. I've only got one choice. His hands were spread out and channeled more chakra into his technique than he ever had in one jutsu. Shinra Tensai. Naruto harnessed his chakra and sent it out in a large blast of repulsive energy. The jutsu didn't get rid of the entire firestorm, but it did create a large hole in the center. The attack was also aimed directly at the lion mask, which Naruto knew from the last time launched fire attacks. His Shinra Tensai completely overpowered the mask and sent it sailing into and through a tree. It cracked as it plowed into the earth and then shattered seconds later, the thread that held the mask together unraveling in the process. A sigh escaped Naruto's mouth, however, he soon found he had no time to rest as a voice behind him called out. Come here, you motherfucker. Turning, Naruto saw a literally burnt to the crisp Hidan. The silver-haired man's skin was flaking and falling off due to the poisonous and acidic effects of his yuki. Naruto could even see the man's ribcage being exposed along with several muscle groups that looked close to melting off. Naruto had to wonder how the man was still alive, much less able to run at him. Thankfully, his surprise at seeing someone actually survive an attack with his yuki was not enough to keep him from acting. Naruto channeled chakra into his index finger and made an L shape with his hand. Reddish-black yuki crackled into a ball on the tip of his finger, before it was released in a large cylindrical wave that overtook Hidan. This time the man didn't even get the chance to cry out in pain as his entire body was literally vaporized by the power Naruto pushed into the attack. Before Naruto could pat himself on the back, he was attacked by another mask, this one looking like some kind of deformed biped. It shot a large bolt of white lightning at him that Naruto was forced to use his speed to dodge. As he sped out of the way of the lightning, Naruto was about to use Shundo to get near Kisame, who looked to be closest to him. However, before he could do so, a large fire dragon rushed at him. Gritting his teeth, Naruto absorbed the chakra from the jutsu, only to yelp in pain as the lightning bolt hit him from behind. Thanks to the yuki that covered his skin, it was protected for the most part, but that attack still stung something fierce. Glaring at the mask, Naruto Shundo directly next to it, and then pulverized it with a yuki-enhanced fist. On instinct alone he spun on the balls of his feet. Naruto launched an energy blast at Itachi, who had appeared behind him. He only had enough time to widen his eyes as he saw the pulse of chakra. Only for Itachi to explode violently. Naruto was launched back due to combined might of his yuki attack and Itachi's exploding clone. Flipping around, Naruto landed on his feet and skidded several meters back, leaving 2 long trenches from where his heels had been forced to dig into the ground. He uncrossed his arms, which were smoking, but there was thankfully no damage done to him beyond the average stinging in his arms. He looked at the 3 remaining enemies. Itachi was standing just a little ways away, along with Kisame. Kakazu was farther away, and Naruto saw that his entire body was covered with stitches and predominantly appeared to be sewn together, and if he was seeing from the wind mask that had been attacking him a little while ago going into his back said anything, his body was composed of hundreds of thick, dark gray threads woven throughout his flesh. Kind of gross, but considering some of the demons he had seen, not all that unusual. This Gaki's much stronger than we thought, Kisame said. He managed to destroy 2 of my hearts, Kakazu grumbled. I haven't had someone destroy my hearts since my battle with the Shodai Hokage. You have fought most admirably, Naruto-kun, said Itachi. However, surely you can see you are at a disadvantage. Please surrender and come quietly. Naruto began snickering. Then he began laughing. You don't honestly think I'm going to give up after this battle just started getting good, do you? This is the kind of fight I've been waiting for. Hey, the Gaki's got guts, I'll give him that, Kisame said with a smirk. If he wants a fight, I say we oblige the kid, Itachi. Itachi closed his eyes and seemed resigned. It seems we have no choice. Hey, you haven't seen anything yet, Itachi, Naruto said as his eyes began to glow dark reddish black, making his Rinnegan eyes look truly demonic. Yuki began pouring out of him in waves, the energy forming a cylinder around him that began to crackle with the contained energy. The 3 S-rank ninja all saw the power, and while they didn't know what it was, they knew instinctively that it would be a bad idea to let him unleash that power. Itachi, Kakazu and Kisame all sped towards the blonde. Kisame readied several hand seals for his most powerful jutsu. The brat had already hurt his Samahata with his weird chakra, there was no way he would let it get damaged again. The 2 remaining masks extended out of Kakazu's body and readied their jutsu while the missing Taki ninja, skin took on a metallic gray color. Itachi had activated his Menchikyo eyes, preparing to use his most powerful jutsu on the blonde. However, before any of the four fighters could attack, a large red wave of energy crested between them. The power blew the 3S rank ninja back, while Naruto dug his heels into the ground and channeled chakra to his feet. The power, which Naruto noted was Yuki, flew past them, leaving a large trench as it continued on into the forest where it left even more destruction in its wake before dissipating. What was left between the 3S rank ninja and Naruto was a large trench that had steam pouring off of it, like the attack had literally melted parts of the earth. 3 sets of eyes widened as Itachi, Kisame and Kakazu wondered who had the power to create such a powerful attack. Sorry I'm late Naruto-sama. Everyone turned to see a beautiful red-haired female with carmine eyes and red hair with gold highlights. She was wearing a crimson sleeveless unitard with mesh netting running along the sides of her torso and a black battle kimono over it. A red sash with a black line running through the center held the kimono together. At the bottom front left side of the kimono was the symbol of the Kitsun clan. The outfit clung to most of her body like a second skin, and though it didn't show much it left very little to the imagination. On her feet were a pair of old-style ninja greaves, where the big toe was separated from the rest. The armor was a dark red in color, with golden lines moving across it in the pattern. They were segmented and moved up her calves, stopping at the ankle where a fox head was being used as a knee guard. Likewise she was wearing a pair of shoulder guards that were shaped in a fox head with the same color scheme being used. On her forearms was the same segmented armor as her ankles, which stopped in a guard plate just above her knuckles. Under that she had red fingerless gloves. Her red hair with gold highlights was tied into a ponytail behind her with a red headpiece that possessed 4 triangles surrounding and keeping her hair in place. The long red tresses swayed in a light breeze. Strapped across her back was a long sheath and in her left hand was an odashi. Everyone looked at the beautiful, smiling female, wondering who she was. Everyone except Naruto. Sorry I'm late Naruto-sama. Kaobi said with a bright smile as she looked at Naruto. That smile turned into an embarrassed blush as Naruto suddenly appeared right next to her and began rubbing their cheeks together. Kyu-chan. He cried out as he rubbed his left cheek against hers affectionately. I should be totally pissed at you for interrupting what had to be the most awesome fight I've ever been in. But you're just so damn sexy in that outfit that I can't even bring myself to care about that. Naruto-sama, Kaobi replied embarrassingly. She tried to push the blonde off of her, but he seemed to know she would do that and stuck to her like glue. Eventually several tick marks formed on her head and she smashed the flat end of her sword against his head. Oi, what was that for? Asked Naruto, rubbing the newly formed lump on his head. He sniffed a little as crocodile tears formed in his eyes. That really hurt you know. That was for embarrassing me, Kaobi said, not falling for his games. He had been playful enough during their time in Makai that she knew all the tricks he had, and knew the most effective way not to fall for them. For example, when he began to form those false tears in his eyes, it was best to just ignore him as you would a child. He would stop eventually, she just had to be patient. But I missed you. More tears began pouring out of his eyes. However, Kaobi just rolled hers. He had tried the fake tears before and it hadn't worked then. What made the blonde think it would work now? Yes, and I missed you too, Kaobi said, giving him a quick peck on the lips. Now, you're in a battle, remember? Oh right. Naruto grinned almost sheepishly as he turned to face the 3S rank ninja who were staring at the two uncertainly. Your sexiness made me forget all about them. Kaobi rolled her eyes as she placed the blunt end of her nodashi on her shoulder. I'm sure. Naruto turned back to the group and gave them a smirk. Now, how about we continue right where we left off? The 3S rank shinobi just stared at the blonde and the redhead, blinking owlishly as different thoughts went through their head. Naruto-sama. That was the first thing that crossed Kisami's mind as he saw the hot red head that just came strolling into the middle of their fight with the kick-ass looking sword. Why is it always these Bishonen pretty boys who get all the girls? Everywhere they went he never got any looks, other than the, oh my god he's blue and has gills kind of looks. It was always Itachi who got the girls swooning over him. And he never did anything to the girls making cow eyes at him. Just ignored them like he did everyone else. Damn that Itachi. Now this brat, who despite looking much older than his 13 years was still only 13 and had the hottest female Kisame had ever seen in his life calling him Naruto-sama. It just wasn't fair. He was an all-powerful S-rank shinobi wanted in Kiri for killing a number of their nobility. Wasn't that worth something? Didn't he have the badass thing going for him? Why wasn't that enough to get the chicks? It's the gills isn't it? Kisame lamented. Or maybe it was because he was blue. He could never figure it out. Meanwhile, Itachi was analyzing everything that had happened so far since the battle had begun. Out of all of Akatsuki members who came to capture the blonde former Jinchuriki, not that Naruto was aware of their actual reason for fighting him, he was the one who could see Naruto with the most clarity. And what he saw disturbed him. Having assumed he was using the Kyuubi's Yuki when that reddish-black energy began leaking out, Itachi had activated his Mangekyo in the hopes he could use the Sharingan's latent ability to suppress the Kyuubi. Unlike Madara's famed ability in manipulating the Kyuubi, Itachi's could not do that, but it could push it back. However, when he activated his Mangekyo and got ready, he saw that the power Naruto was using was not the Kyuubi's. It was all his own. The reddish-black energy that could not be anything other than some kind of demonic chakra belonged solely to Naruto. Even worse, the feeling Itachi got from the Yuki being put out by the blonde was much stronger than what he had felt that night 13 years ago when the Kyuubi attacked Konoha. It did not have the killing intent, nor the bloodlust that the Kyuubi had during the attack. No, this was just pure, unadulterated power. More power than anything Itachi had ever felt in his life. And it was this which disturbed him more than anything else. He turned his attention to the red head and his eyes widened. Though he could sense she was suppressing her power greatly, he could see it rolling off her in subtle waves with his Sharingan. A red energy that was far more powerful than him, Kakazu and Kisame combined. The only thing they had to be thankful for was that the girl's power was not as strong as Naruto's. Not that this knowledge was much of a consolation prize. For just a second, the image of a raging nine-tailed fox appeared behind her. Itachi's eyes widened and in the next second it disappeared, leaving him wondering if there might be a problem with his Sharingan, because what he had just seen should not be possible. Possible or not, Itachi was no longer confident of their chances of victory. Naruto had been keeping pace with them and already killed one of their members, and he didn't seem winded in the least. That meant if they wanted to survive the day they only had one option available to them. Kisame, Kakazu, Itachi said. The situation has become unfavorable. We must retreat. What? Kisame asked, looking at his partner. Ah, come on Itachi. Surely just because this babe's been added to the equation doesn't mean we should give up. We have been at a disadvantage since the beginning, Kisame, Itachi said. Even with the information leader Sama gave us on the Rinnegan, we had no clue about his other powers. It's clear continuing to fight at this moment is ill-advised. TCH, alright, Kisame grumbled. He looked over at Naruto and grinned. Looks like it's your lucky day, Squirt. We won't be able to rumble with you anymore. Ha ha ha, Naruto laughed. You shouldn't speak so confidently after what Itachi just said. The blonde grinned and tapped his ears. I heard the entire conversation. Do me a favor, tell your leader that if he wants something done he should gather more people. Oh, and he should probably come here himself. If he's strong enough that S-rank ninja are following then he'd probably give me a good fight. Kisame smirked. Hey, we'll be sure to remember that. As the three ninja disappeared, Kyuubi turned to Naruto with a raised eyebrow. You're just letting them go. Yep, Naruto replied, his nonchalance making Kyuubi gain a tick mark on her head. With you here killing them would have been too easy. Hopefully, when they show up again I'll get an even better fight. Figures that was your reason, Kyuubi muttered. You're just like Raizen-sama, always looking for a better fight. You day that like it's a bad thing, Naruto joked. It's not a bad thing, I just don't think it's conducive to your health, Kyuubi replied. Well, in order to get stronger I need to fight, right? Said Naruto. So if I let them go it gives them the opportunity to get stronger and give me a better fight. As far as I can see it's a win-win situation, I get a good fight, and they get to live longer. Kyuubi rolled her eyes but didn't reply, his answer was exactly what she expected. Like Raizen, Naruto loved battle and if given the option of letting an opponent live so they could give him a better fight another day, he would do so every time. You'll be pleased to know that I've informed the Kitsun clan council of your existence, Kyuubi said, smoothly changing the subject. And everything is in place, she answered. We're currently gathering members of the clan that have been scattered across Makai. It will take a while as the demon world is a big place, but I'm confident that we'll find all of the members within a year. I've also spoken with them about becoming your personal summons, many seem intrigued by the idea. I take it a few don't, said Naruto. Some seem to think it's beneath us, Kyuubi said with a frown. She might have said more but their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Shikamaru and the rest of his squad. The three ninja plus three dogs ran up to them and stopped just a few feet away. Damn, troublesome blonde, Shikamaru muttered, you know we caught your explosions from the city. Perhaps you could go a little farther out next time. You nearly caused a panic with the civilians. He looked at the area that had been a battlefield just a few minutes previously and shook his head. The entire land was littered with craters, trenches and scorch marks. It looked like a maelstrom had passed through the place, pun very much intended. And did you have to destroy the entire place? Man, this is so troublesome. Oops, Naruto said sheepishly. Guess I got a bit carried away. Won't happen again. Whatever, Shikamaru muttered. His eyes panned over to Kyuubi and he frowned. Who's she? Ah, that's right, introductions, Naruto said. Right, team, this is Kit. He studiously ignored the way Kyuubi's eyes twitched at his name for her. She a friend of mine I met while training for the Chunin exams. Kit those are Nara Shikamaru, Aburame Shino, Inazuka Hana and the Heimaru Senkyodai. Kit, are you serious? Is that the best you can come up with? Naruto only just managed to keep his face impassive at the disgruntled sound in Kaobi's voice. Yeah well, you came on rather short notice and I had to come up with something. I couldn't just say, by the way guys, this the Kaobi no Yoko. You know, the demon lord that nearly destroyed Konoha. Oh but don't worry, she's totally cool and a real demon in the sack. Yeah, that would go over well. But did it have to be Kit? Naruto blinked at the whine in Kaobi's voice. What's wrong with Kit? I thought it was a decent name considering I only had a few seconds to think of it. Why Kit? Because it's short for Kitsun. Naruto gave the mental equivalent of a shrug and received what amounted to a face palm. Hello, greeted Hana while Shino gave a nod of acknowledgement and Shikamaru just yawned. A pleasure, Kaobi said politely if a bit reserved. Naruto knew it was because she didn't like humans, but was being tolerant of them because of him. Hopefully, she would come to see that humans weren't so bad after interacting with them a bit more. So what did you guys find out on Tsunade? Asked Naruto once the introductions had been made. Well she's no longer in town, Hana replied. I went to a few gambling parlors and it seems we just missed her. She was in a few days ago and left yesterday. Her heading was north of here so there are several possible choices of location. With what we know of Tsunade it will likely be the place with the largest casino, Naruto said. In that case you'd want to go to Tanzakugai, said Kaobi. Everyone including Naruto turned to look at her. What? I've gambled on occasion, she defended. During her tenure in the human world, after being forced to leave Makai, Kaobi needed some way to get money to live. While she could have seduced rich men to make do, the thought of seducing a human was repulsive to her. So she had taken to gambling, and considering she had the luck of a fox, pun very much intended, her streak of winning had at one point been almost as legendary as Tsunade's streak at losing. Then I suppose that's where we're going, Naruto determined. We'll rest up in a hotel tonight and make our way to Tanzakugai tomorrow. With Naruto's decision made the group plus Kaobi made their way back into the town to find a place to sleep. As they walked through the town Naruto found that Shikamaru was correct, everyone seemed to be talking about the large and rather destructive battle that Naruto had with Itachi and the other S-rank ninja. Naruto wasn't sure if they knew he was the one in the battle, or if it was just the fact that he was wearing his ninja garb, but many of the people were looking at him, or perhaps the group in general as they moved. A few people even pointed and began talking about them. Naruto, who had enhanced hearing, listened in on a few of the conversations around him. Hey, did you hear those explosions just a few minutes ago? Yeah, I heard there was a battle. They say several powerful shinobi were fighting. I heard the shinobi were fighting a demon. Naruto almost snickered at that last one. It was undoubtedly just a rumor people made up for the mass amounts of destruction Naruto had caused. It was also unknowingly the most accurate description of what happened. Finding a hotel was rather easy. There were several dozen around the town and the team of Konoha shinobi and Kaobi chose a small hotel called the Lazy Panda. They ended up getting 3 rooms, one for Hana and her dogs, one for Shikamaru and Shino, and another for Kaobi and Naruto. Shikamaru and Shino had both looked at them oddly at that, but shrugged it off. Shikamaru because he just didn't care, and Shino because he was too tactful to say anything. Hana might have said something, but despite having been apart for the better part of a week, Naruto's scent was all over Kaobi. It wasn't all that hard for an Inuzuka to figure out. And even if she had been willing to question them, it was A, none of her business, and B, both Naruto and Kaobi exuded that alpha-like aura of power and Hana had no desire to be on the receiving end of their ire should her questions prove invasive. So she left with nothing more than a simple good night. Birth of the new Demon King. Meanwhile, Naruto sighed as he sat in the same seat he had been using ever since dropping Kin off at the hospital. It had been nearly a week now, and he had been coming in every day to check up on her. However, the young Kunoichi had yet to wake from her coma-like state. While he had not been allowed into the patient's room very often, the doctors had let him see her a few times, and from the dulled, glazed-over eyes Kin wasn't in a good way. The blonde was actually beginning to wonder if she would ever wake up. He was also beginning to get bored. Most if not all its time was spent sitting in the waiting room at the hospital. Usually his day consisted of sitting in the exact same chair day in and day out, waiting for a comatose patient who only had a slim possibility of actually waking up. The doctors had told him that there was something like a 1 out of 10 probability that the way Kin's mind had forced itself to shut down would never heal and she would remain in a vegetable-like state for the rest of her life. A few had even suggested he might be better off leaving and letting them send a message if she ever began to respond. Not that he could leave even though he wanted to. Orders were orders and it wasn't like it could do anything else. He didn't have any money so he couldn't buy ramen, he even had to sleep outside in a tree and used a stream 2 miles outside of the town to bathe and wash his clothes because he couldn't rent a hotel. Having lived on the plains of Makai for the first 3 weeks of his training, he was used to much worse. Compared to the barren wasteland he had lived in there, the blistering hot days, freezing cold nights, and the possibility of having demons pop out of nowhere and attempt to kill him sitting in a hospital all day was a walk in the park. But just because his current situation wasn't difficult didn't mean he had to like the current situation he found himself in. As far as Naruto was concerned, monotony killed far more easily than any demon ever did. In an attempt to alleviate his boredom, Naruto let his mind wander to that of the girl he saved. Of course, saved was a completely relative term. According to the doctors, by the time he had found and brought her to them, she had been raped an uncountable number of times, by somewhere upwards of 40 people. It was difficult for them to know for sure. The doctors here were good, but they weren't shinobi. They had no medical jutsu that would let them know just how bad a wound is, or anything specific information on their patient's problem. And they had told him that much of the sperm the men using kin had shot into were unidentifiable because the cells had more or less meshed together, likely due to her being used by different people one after the other, they said. His thoughts on the girl, as they were all humans, were as always since his rebirth into a demon, confusing. Personally, he didn't much care for her. She wasn't a friend, or even an acquaintance. He didn't know her and had no interactions with her beyond watching her battle with Shikamaru. Beyond and above that, she was a human, and while Naruto didn't hate or even mildly dislike humans as a whole, and would consider a few of them friends, he didn't like them either. His feelings on humanity in general could be more described as indifference or apathy than anything else. Of course, the same could be said for any demon that wasn't Kaobi. The life and death of someone he didn't know just didn't bother him like it would have before Orochimaru forced Kaobi's Yuki to activate his demonic heritage. Now, if he had considered kin to be one of his friends, that would have been a whole different set of kunai. But as things were, he had no feelings of personal attachment to the girl. That still didn't mean he approved or even liked the things that had happened to her. While he didn't give a damn about the life or death of someone, demon or otherwise, that he had never met, Naruto had adopted a code of honor that was derived from a combination of his old Nindo when he was still a human, and Raizen's own code of honor. Both had been similar enough that there was very little he needed changing to create an adapted code for himself. One of the most important parts of his code, which both he and Raizen had agreed, was that rape was a despicable act. Whether the rape victim was a demon or a human didn't matter. The act of rape, having sex with an unwilling person, was not only an offense to Naruto's sense of honor but also the actions of someone who was so pathetic no woman would be willing to sleep with them. And it was for this reason that Naruto decided to help Kin. Because she had been raped. Not just raped, but raped multiple times by her own comrades and superiors. People she should have been able to trust implicitly had used her like some kind of cheap whore. Worse even, as at least a whore would get paid and only had to deal with one person at a time. While he himself had never been raped, he did live in the red light district, a place where rape happened on a regular basis. He could clearly remember his first experience in learning what rape was. He had been 5 years old, going on 6, and had not yet even entered the academy. The orphanage had kicked him out, claiming that because he was entering the ninja academy they were no longer responsible. Thankfully, Sarutobi had found him when he was wandering around looking for food and got him an apartment. Unfortunately, because the people who owned the apartment complex hated him, they kicked him out as soon as they were sure the Hokage wouldn't check up on him. They waited for about a month, before claiming that because he couldn't pay his bills, which were 3 times higher than anyone else's, that he could no longer live in their complex. Having been young, naive and more than a little stupid, Naruto hadn't questioned the man and tried to find an apartment. He had thought about going to the Hokage, but it had been nearly impossible to get a meeting with the man. As Hokage he was very busy, and according to the secretary he was always in a meeting whenever he showed up. Once again, not really questioning whether or not what the woman said was true, Naruto decided he would find an apartment on his own. And he did, in the red light district. The blemish of Konoha, a cesspit filled with cutthroats and gangs. Most people think Konoha was just the beautiful village with thousands of trees spread throughout it, the glittering new buildings, shops and houses that line the main streets. Or the massive and expensive-looking clan compounds and mansions in the nobility section of Konoha. This was because the council made sure no one of importance ever saw the red light district. Naruto was sure they had even paid off some of the Hokage's shinobi to overlook the area on their routine sweeps of the village. It had been during one of his scavenging hunts that he saw it. Naruto had been looking for food in one of the dumpsters. He had used up all his pay on the apartment and he couldn't go to the office that worked the funds for orphans going to the academy for another week, so he had been forced to make do on his own. While he had been scavenging he had heard a woman's muffled screaming. Perhaps it had been his own innate sense of curiosity, or maybe even at that age he had felt a need to protect others. Whatever the case was, Naruto found himself following the screams and cries that had attracted his attention. It was when he had looked around a corner that he had seen them, 2 men and 1 woman. The woman was naked, she had been gagged and one of the men had been holding a knife to her throat. Both of the men had their pants and underwear pulled down, and one of them had been plowing into her with reckless abandon while the other had roughly grasped her breasts, all the while holding a knife to her neck and telling her that if she didn't shut up he would slit her throat. The woman had cried and squirmed but didn't fight back. She had been defeated and let the two do what they wanted, and Naruto, scared, confused and unsure, had ran off before they noticed him. He had done his best to put that moment out of his mind, hiding the memory behind lock and key like he had so many other nightmare-giving memories. However, memories like that never stayed hidden for very long, and all it usually took was one incident to bring them back to the surface. "Excuse me, Uzumaki-san." Naruto looked up after hearing his name called to see a pretty brunette nurse holding a clipboard looking at him. "Yes. That girl you brought here, she woke up just a little while ago," the nurse said. "I figured you might like to see your friend now that she's awake." Naruto didn't correct the woman's title for their relationship. He just stood up and smiled at the woman. "I'd like that, thank you." The nurse led him through the hallway and to a door with a wooden plaque numbered 25. She unlocked the door and opened it, gesturing for Naruto to enter. The room was pretty much conducive to every other hospital room Naruto had ever been in. The walls were a bland shade of white. There was a cabinet with medicine, a desk for the doctor, a hospital bed with a sheet that could be moved around it for privacy, one window and a small plant near the door. As if people thought one measly plant would be enough to bring color to such a dreary room. Tsuchi-kin was sitting upright in the bed. She didn't look good, her face was still pale and her eyes were frightened. But she was at least awake, and Naruto could see the spark of awareness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. "Hey there," Naruto said, getting the girl's attention as he walked further into the room. The dark-haired girl's eyes snapped over to him, they widened almost comically. However, the fear that showed in them made the situation anything but funny. The kind of fear that the dark-haired girl held in her eyes was almost overpowering and seemed like an instinctual reaction, rather than the logical kind of fear a shinobi might use to push their senses and physical bodies to the limit in order to escape death. Kin let out a loud shriek, both of pain and fear as she dove into the bed. Naruto blinked, not at all expecting that kind of reaction. He walked a few more steps into the room. Hey, are you alright? Before he could finish his last sentence, Kin began screaming again, though this time words were involved. "Please don't hurt me. I promise I'll be good. I won't fail him again. I promise. Just please don't hurt me." Naruto had no clue what was going on. While the blonde had seen the action of rape take place, he had never seen the aftermath of what happened to rape victims, so he didn't know what to do in a situation like this. Thankfully he didn't have to. The screams must have alerted the people working in the building, for a few seconds later a female doctor and two nurses, both female as well, entered. "What's going on here?" asked the doctor in a slightly rushed voice, having obviously just come in because of the noise. "I don't know," Naruto said, looking confused. "I was told Kin was awake and I just came here to see if she was alright. Then she just started screaming the moment she saw me." "Right, out you go then," the doctor said, beginning to push him out the door. "I'll find out what's wrong. Please wait patiently outside." Naruto sighed a bit as the door closed behind him. He walked over to the opposite end and leaned against the wall, crossing his arms. He wasn't sure how long he waited, but it must have been at least half an hour before the doctor came out. She spotted him as soon as the door opened and made a beeline for him. Before he could even ask how Kin was, she cut him off. "How well do you know her?" Naruto blinked in a bit of confusion but answered the question. "Not very well. I know she was a competitor in the recent Chunin exams that Konoha hosted, and was a kunoichi for Otogaku. But not much more than that. I know that my team had actually fought against her while I was unconscious, and I saw her fight against a comrade in the preliminary matches." "And do you know of her situation?" "Of course I do," Naruto said, almost scoffing. He was actually somewhat offended that this woman thought he didn't know what had happened to Kin. "I was the one who brought her here after all. I was also the one who saved her from being used in a ninjutsu that required a living sacrifice." The woman nodded, seemingly satisfied with his answer. "What we have here is a typical case of rape, only on a much larger scale." The woman flipped through some of the sheets in her clipboard. "One of the more common reactions that a rape victim will experience is fear. And according to the information I have says that she was raped multiple times within at least a several-week time span. That kind of thing induces a lot of fear, especially of the opposite sex. Chances are just seeing a male will be enough to set her off." "What else can you tell me about this?" asked Naruto, knowing that the more information he had, the better off he would be to deal with this. "Fear will probably be the most pervasive feeling she experiences," said the doctor. "Fear about their environment, about their health, about their personal relationships. Rape between people who know each other is especially likely to cause suspicions about personal relationships. In fact, there is some evidence that the better the victim knows the assailant, the greater is the devastation to her personal life. This is because an attack by a friend or acquaintance can cause someone to suspect even those she had previously trusted. Despite the type of attack, it is common for women to fear the response and reaction of family and friends. Naruto frowned. He didn't know much about Kin's situation. He didn't even know if she had a family. Still, she had been raped by her superiors. Had she known all of them? Had she trusted any of them? They had been working for Orochimaru, a man who was well known for being any sort of trustworthy. Then again, Kin had also been working for him, but there may have been extenuating circumstances that had forced her to work for him. There was a good possibility Orochimaru had given one of those, work for me or die, threats he was so fond of, or maybe she had been seduced by the promise of power. That was also very probable. And once she had been ensnared by the hubby Sanin, it was undoubtedly impossible to get out of his service. If that was the case with her, then others may have had similar situations. Was there anyone she had trusted that had also been in Orochimaru's camp? Had she trusted her teammates? Naruto sighed as he realized he would need to find that out at some point so Kin would have someone she was comfortable in the presence of around. But at the moment that was neither here nor there. He looked back at the doctor. So what else can you tell me? She will likely doubt herself, she said. Because she doubts herself and feels unclean, it is easy for her to assume that others feel the same way about her. She may become suspicious in her personal relationships, and avoid social contacts which might have been normal for her previously. When a person has been subjected to another person's will, her sense of her personal power may be seriously threatened. She may lose faith in her own ability to make the right decision and to exert any form of independence. Indecisiveness and increased dependence on others are common characteristics following a rape attack. Now, there are 3 steps that most rape victims go through. Shock. During this phase, the victim may suffer from acute anxiety, fear, and guilt, and observable reactions can vary from hysteria to numbness. Denial. During this stage, the victim attempts to forget the whole thing. She will probably discuss the incident very little, will deny any strong feelings of hurt or anger, and will attempt to return to her daily routine. Integration. Despite attempts to return to business as usual, many rape victims realize that the attack has played a more important role in their lives than they had realized. Recurring nightmares, uneasiness about the environment, and difficulties with personal relationships often continues to plague them. Prolonged effects of the attack may force a woman into a healthy reevaluation of the incident and its impact on her life. Now, first and most important steps in the integration process is for the victim to acknowledge her own feelings of hurt and anger toward her assailant. Girls and women who are subjected to this kind of attack often find it inappropriate to feel hatred or vindictiveness and may only increase the tension in themselves by trying to deny such feelings. Likewise, once a victim can admit to herself that she feels some guilt about the attack, she can begin to examine the source of that guilt. Once she understands that much of it comes from the myths about rape which she herself has accepted, she can feel more secure about how she handled her situation and can stop projecting her own self-doubt onto those around her. There doesn't seem to be much I can do to help her with this, Naruto admitted with a frown. He sighed. He would need to find her someone who could help, because he couldn't actually understand what she had been through. So she'll be afraid of men, he muttered, looking at the doctor. Would it help if she was talking with a woman? Yes, she shouldn't feel any fear from a woman. Naruto frowned as he checked his stores of Yuki. The energy was much more potent than chakra and allowed for him to last longer, but he had still been alive for around a week. Even without using any jutsu, he was bound to have been drained significantly. Fortunately, he seemed to have enough for what he needed to do. Going through a few hand seals, Naruto was engulfed in a cloud of smoke. When it dispersed, the doctor's eyes widened when she saw that in the blonde-haired male's place was an absolutely drop-dead gorgeous woman with an ample bust, thin waist, firm hips and mile-long legs. The female doctor couldn't help but feel a spark of jealousy towards the beauty in front of her. Do you think this would work? Asked Naruto, which was the name of Naruto's Warok form. Sure, the doctor said stupidly. Good. Naruto left the stumped doctor in the hallway as he opened the door and entered the room. Kin looked up the moment the blonde entered, but relaxed when she noticed it was a girl. Hello, Naruto said with a smile as she sat down. Hello, do I know you? Asked Kin. Well, sort of, Naruto replied, rubbing the back of her head. I was a competitor in the Chunin exams. Kin's eyes widened in recognition at the name. How come I don't remember you? Oh, you do, Naruto replied. I'm sure of it. In fact, your team even fought my team. Kin's brows furrowed in thought as she heard Naruto's words. She couldn't remember fighting this girl during the Chunin exams. Naruto seemed to notice this and said, I'll give you a hint, it was during the second stage. The second stage. Kin blinked. But the only blonde girl we fought during the second stage was that Yamanaka. I don't even remember seeing you. Oh, I didn't say you fought me, just my team, Naruto said with a smile. I was unconscious for most of that fight, and by the time I woke up you were unconscious yourself. But the only other blonde I even remember seeing was. She trailed off and her eyes widened. Bingo, Naruto said with a wink. Be you, but wait. I thought you were a guy. Kin all but shouted. There's no way you could be that Uzumaki kid. I specifically remember him being a guy. Ninja here, Naruko said, pointing to herself. Kin blinked at the answer. She looked at Naruko, her brow furrowed. Reaching out, she grabbed a handful of Naruko's breasts, eliciting a squeak of surprise. What are you doing? These are definitely real, Kin said. Therefore there is no way you can that Uzumaki kid. Naruko's eyebrows twitched. First off, the name's Naruto, not Uzumaki kid. Secondly, this isn't a henge, this is a real transformation. A cage henge shadow transformation, if you want to call it something. So this is a real transformation? Asked Kin, frowning some more. Yep, Naruko said, swiping a thumb under her nose as she grinned proudly. It was a decidedly Naruto action. I was playing around with the hand seals, trying to find out how they work. I'd been channeling my chakra, and I guess I wasn't paying attention to that, because the next thing I knew I was a woman. So you're really a woman? Asked Kin. While in this form, yes. Kin nodded, as if she had been expecting that answer. And why would you transform into a girl? Naruko looked at her and tilted her head. Because when I came in here in my guy form you flipped. The doctor told me it was because. She trailed off, coughing into her hand before continuing. Anyways, I figured you'd be more comfortable with me in this form than my other one. Oh, Kin had to blink in surprise at that answer. Especially when she realized that despite knowing the person in front of her was a man in some kind of super transformation, she actually was comfortable with her. Or as comfortable as she could be in the presence of a complete stranger. Well, thank you for being so considerate, I guess. No problem, Naruko said cheerfully. And now that we have all these questions out of the way, I have a few things to tell you. Kin raised an eyebrow, like Orochimaru is dead and I'm the one who killed him. Kin nearly choked on her own spit at hearing those words. She looked at Naruko to see the girl was dead serious. Kin couldn't detect a lie anywhere in her voice. So Orochimaru is really dead? Asked Kin. Naruko nodded. Yep, Orochimaru is dead, and the invasion failed. Thanks to you, in fact. Me. Kin's eyes widened, and this time it was comical. Naruko almost giggled at seeing the way the other girl's jaw dropped. Naruko nodded her head. You see, I was going back to Konoha from my training when I ran into the place you were being, kept. She noticed Kin wince but continued. After I saved you, I interrogated the shinobi there and found out about the invasion. So really, the whole reason the invasion failed was because of you. I guess that makes sense, Kin mumbled. She looked down at her hands, which were trembling slightly. Naruko noticed this and leaned down to see the girl's face, and was surprised to see tears. Hey, are you okay? Asked Naruko. Come on, please don't cry. Even in this form I could never stand seeing a girl cry. I think it's even worse in this form because I feel so much more emotional. Kin seemed to giggle, or Naruko thought she did, it was a very strange sound. Naruko wondered if she had done or said something wrong. But when the dark-haired girl looked at the blonde, there was a smile on her face. Thank you, Kin muttered, wiping at her eyes. It took Naruko a moment to realize what Kin was thanking her for. But when she did, Naruko smiled as well. You're welcome. Now, I was hoping to ask you something, and seeing how I doubt you're going to want to go back to Odo. Kin interrupted her with a snort, and Naruko smiled. I thought so. Anyways, I have a proposition for you that I want you to think about. Kin looked at Naruko oddly for a moment. What is it? She asked, causing Naruko to smile. Well, birth of the new demon king. For the rest of the night, Aburame Shino, Inuzuka Hana, Nara Shikamaru, and everyone else who had gotten a room to stay the night at the Lazy Panda Inn was subject to the moans and screams of pleasure from Naruto and Kaobi until well into the morning. Within her room, Inuzuka Hana and her ninkin were forced to listen to Naruto and Kaobi rutting like dogs in heat, thanks to their strong hearing. The cries of ecstasy emitting from the pair were nearly 3 times louder to them than anyone else. Hana, red-faced, embarrassed and horny due to the grunts and groans she could hear, she still did her best to block out the sounds of sex. Ooh godsss. Yes. Right there Naruto-sama. At a particularly loud shout from Kaobi, Hana's face took on a shade so red it looked like a solar flare. On either side of the bed the Heimaru Senkyodai whimpered and covered their faces with their paws, as if the action would somehow help block out the noises the two demons made. I know how you boys feel, Hana said with a groan. If this keeps up I may have to take a cold shower. The 3 ninkin looked at each other at hearing their master's words and just whimpered some more. So you failed to capture the Kaobi Jinchuriki? Asked Pain, his voice holding no emotion though many of the members were sure he was displeased. Not only that but he somehow managed to kill Hidan. He was using some kind of weird chakra that I've never seen before, Kisame said, giving his input on the matter. When I tried to let Semihata eat it, his chakra actually damaged it. I see. He was also far stronger than we thought he was, Itachi added in his emotionless tone. He managed to fight off all four of us without much effort, and killed Hidan by vaporizing his entire body. Pain turned to a man who looked like he had been swallowed by a large plant. Were you at least able to retrieve the ring? No, Leader Sama. Hidan's entire body was destroyed, the plant said, his voice switching from a light tone to a more evil one and back again. There wasn't anything left of him, not even ashes. The Kyuubi Jinchuriki is stronger than we had assumed. This is going to be a problem. Shall we go after him again? Asked Kakazu. No, Pain shook his head. Without knowing how powerful he is, we would just be wasting resources. We'll start searching for the other Biju and Jinchuriki before moving on to the Kyuubi. In the meantime, I want a portion of our spy network dedicated to learning everything we can about the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. All of the members agreed, not like they could do anything else since Pain was the one in charge. One by one the images began to flicker out, leaving only Pain, Conan and the masked man known as Madara. It seems he is going to be more trouble than we first thought, Madara commented lightly. Perhaps, Pain conceded. However, this is merely a setback. Should he become too much of a problem, I will go after him myself. Then he will face the will of God. Very well, see to it that you do not underestimate him. As Madara vanished, Pain narrowed his eyes at where the man had been. Soon, Madara, I will not have to listen to you, he said, though only Conan was around to hear him. And you shall know the pain of what happens when you try to control me. You will face the wrath of God. Birth of the new Demon King. Kyuubi gave a gratifying sigh as she rode another wave of pleasure caused by the blonde above her. As her orgasm diminished, the redhead leaned up and kissed Naruto for all he was worth. Their tongues dueled and it was only oxygen became an issue that they let up. Smiling at him she said, we're going to need to get up soon. I know, Naruto said as he looked out the window. Sunlight was beginning to stream in, small rays of light that hit the bed and a few that were getting dangerously close to his eyes. He sighed. It's too bad, we didn't even get to test the full limits of our stamina. Speak for yourself, Kyuubi thought with a sweat drop. While she had been able to keep up with him for this long, Kyuubi knew she would have dropped if Naruto decided to go another round. Just how much stamina did Naruto have? The others will probably be getting up soon. Getting himself off of Kyuubi and out of bed, Naruto stretched himself out, smiling widely as he heard his bones crack. He looked back at Kyuubi, who was just beginning to sit up, smiling as he held a hand out. We should probably take a shower so we don't smell of sex. Well, I am feeling a tad dirty, Kyuubi said, grinning as she took Naruto's hand and let him help her up. Are you going to help me get clean, Naruto-sama? Standing up, she winced a little as a small pain jolted between her thighs. She took a step forward, only to stumble and fall as her legs gave out on her. Naruto quickly caught her, wrapping his arms around her waist and pulling her closer to her. Hey, you alright? Asked Naruto, frowning a little as he felt her body give out on him. I'm fine, Naruto-sama, Kyuubi said. He felt her try to stand again but already knew it would end in failure. He could feel her entire body shaking against him. No, you're not fine, Naruto frowned. Acting quickly, he slid one arm under her legs and the other around her shoulder, sweeping her into his arms and cradling her like a babe. Looking more closely, he could see her eyes were drooping closed. You're exhausted, he sighed. Haim, why didn't you tell me you were getting tired? She hadn't even given him an indication she was tired. I didn't want to disappoint you, she mumbled, her eyes closed and her head falling onto his shoulder. Naruto's frown grew rather prominent before he closed his eyes. Idiot. Huh. Kyuubi opened her eyes to look at Naruto in bleary confusion. You're such an idiot, Naruto mumbled as he leaned his head down and nuzzled it against her own. Frowning a little, Naruto closed his eyes in concentration and focused his Yuki. He molded it, imagining it taking shape before releasing it in a single small burst. Opening his eyes, he watched as the reddish-black energy flew off of his body and landed in front of him. It began to morph and take shape, twisting and growing, gaining 4 appendages, 2 arms and 2 legs before gaining a head. Once the general outline of the energy took on a human form, it began to solidify until a perfect copy of Naruto stood in front of him. Already having its orders, the clone proceeded to the bathroom. Soon the sound of water could be heard from inside. You've gotten better at controlling your Yuki, Kyuubi mumbled with a small, proud smile on her face. Naruto chuckled, a rumbling sound that emitted deep in his chest and made Kyuubi relax against him. I had a good teacher, he said lightly as he sat down on the bed and sat down. He placed Kyuubi on his lap and began stroking her hair, a grin making its way to the blonde's face. After the invasion, I had made a couple thousand clones outside of Konoha and finished the next exercise you had given me. Oh, Kyuubi had given Naruto a set of exercises to complete in case her time in Makai had lasted longer than they both expected. Which one did you complete? The one where I had to balance my on a needle with my Yuki, Naruto said, frowning as he remembered the exercise. Where I have molded my Yuki to a finely honed point on the tip of my finger, then create a flat plane under the needle so that it doesn't sink into the ground at some point while trying to hold my weight. Ah, Kaobi said, yawning. That's not bad at all. You only have 5 more to go then. She giggled. Though even with 5,000 Kage Bunshin these next ones are going to take a few years to complete. So you've told me, he said dryly, not needing a reminder of just how hard the next series of exercises were supposed to be. Do you always have to remind me? Yes. Naruto rolled his eyes as he continued running his hand through her hair. Having been keeping an ear open to listen, he heard when the water was cut off. A second later the blonde's clone came in, grumbling about how lazy his creator was. Said original snickered, making the clone glare at him. The tub is full, asshole. Thank you, Naruto said with a small smirk. He didn't know why, but he had begun finding pleasure in pissing off and antagonizing his clones when they weren't training. Maybe it was because they were all a bunch of disrespectful little shits. If they are, then what does that say about me? Whatever. Prick, Kage Bunshin, Naruto mumbled, snapping the blonde out of his thoughts. Naruto snickered as he stood up with a now sleeping Kaobi in his arms. Stick around, he called out to his clone while walking into the bathroom. I may need you in a little while. The door closed behind the blonde, leaving the clone to sit on the well-used bed and grumble. Your clones have never gotten along, Kaobi mumbled as Naruto walked over to the bathtub. It was filled with water, hot enough that a light steam was rising from it. Naruto knelt down and gently placed the red head in the water, letting her head rest on the towel laying on the lip of the tub. Kaobi sighed in content as she let the warm water seep into her skin. This is nice. Naruto chuckled as he grabbed a sponge and began to wash Kaobi. I like to say my clones and I just have a special relationship. Kaobi snorted. Yeah, special. Let's go with that. Ha! Letting herself relax so completely, Kaobi actually felt like she could fall asleep, and she might have had it not been for Naruto's attentive and gentle hands as he washed her. She couldn't help but love how tender the blonde's touch was. He not only washed her but massaged the sore parts of her body that had gotten sore from their 8-hour sex-a-thon. The last part of her the blonde washed was her hair. When he finished cleaning her, Naruto pulled the plug on the drain and wrapped a towel around the red head before lifting her up. He carried her back into the bedroom where the clone was sitting on the bed meditating. The copy ignored its creator and Kaobi as Naruto set her down on the bed and dried her off. How are you feeling? He asked. Tired, Kaobi admitted, but good as well. I could get used to this. Naruto just chuckled as he finished drying her off and placed his mate under the covers. So you like when I take care of you, Kaobi Haim? Asked Naruto with a teasing grin. And here I thought you were supposed to be taking care of me. Kaobi stuck her tongue at the blonde, causing him to snicker a bit before caressing her cheek. Get some sleep. You can pick up kin in a few hours. I've got to meet my team, I'm sure they're awake by now. Kaobi mumbled, her exhaustion having finally caught up with her as she jumbled words together. Naruto watched as her breathing slowed down to signify she had fallen asleep. He leaned down, kissed her forehead, before standing back up. Keep an eye on her, he said to his clone. And when she leaves, go to Konoha and inform Tusan of what he needs to know. I got it, the clone said, waving the blonde off. The blonde copy wondered why its creator always insisted on giving them vocal commands when it already knew what he wanted. He was more or less talking to himself, so it wasn't as if the Kage Bunshin couldn't understand the blonde just as well as Naruto could understand himself. That was one of the many oddities of the Kage Bunshin technique. Each clone was a perfect copy of Naruto, it had half of his power and could use all of the techniques the blonde could. If they focused, the clones could even see through the eyes of the original and vice versa. And yet despite this, each clone was also distinctly different from their creator and each other. Because they were individuals, could think and act for themselves, they sometimes thought differently than Naruto despite being copies of the original. It was something both Naruto and his clones wondered about from time to time, though they never cared enough to dwell on the subject. Naruto nodded and walked out the door, closing it behind him. Turning around, he was about to make his way down the hall to rouse his team, only to find that they were already awake. Hey you three, he greeted cheerfully. I'm glad you're all, awake. He trailed off as he got a good look at them. Are you guys all right? You guys look kind of tired. The blonde's words were something of an understatement. Hana, Shikamaru, Shino and the 3 Ninken with Hana all looked dead on their feet. Their eyes were bloodshot and they had black bags under them. The Heimaru Senkyodai had their ears drooping and the 3 humans were swaying ever so slightly on their feet. They had definitely seen better days. You guys look like you've stayed up all night. At the blonde's words, a tick mark formed on the heads of the 3 Konoha ninja as they glared at him. Why are you guys glaring at me like that? The glares only seemed to intensify. Did I do something wrong? Guys. Hey, where are you going? He asked when the three abruptly turned and began walking away. Wait up. Guys. Guys. Birth of the new Demon King. As the 4 Konoha ninja left the town, 7 other people were watching them. Is that him? Yes. The blonde one, right? That's the son of Namikaze. Yes. Finally. We'll have our revenge. Quote. Yes. Soon, Minato Namikaze shall suffer just as he caused us to suffer. Let us see how he likes it when he's the one losing the people he loves most. Birth of the new Demon King. One day later. The light began streaming through the windows in the hospital. Small rays of sunlight struck the bed, prompting Tsuchi-kin to wake up as the light hit her eyes. Opening them, Kin blinked several times before letting out a shriek as ruby-red eyes stared back at her. Hello, Kaobi said brightly, finding a small level of amusement in the surprise she had caused in the girl. Who are you? Asked Kin, looking slightly freaked. How long had this girl been here? And who was she? While Kin was no censor, she was fairly good at knowing when other people are near her. Having lived in Odo for most of her teen life, learning to tell when someone was within her personal bubble was something of a necessity. That this girl could get completely past the small space where her sixth sense could detect everything was astonishing. I came all this way to escort you back to Konoha and you don't even know who I am, Kaobi huffed, crossing her arms under her chest. This had the effect of pushing the redhead's breasts up, an action which Kin noticed. The dark-haired girl's eyes traveled to Kaobi's bust, which was both one of largest and most firm she had ever seen. Granted, living in a village like Odo, she could admit to have not seen many women, as most missing ninja kunoichi stay away from the village due to Orochimaru's disreputable character and reputation for being untrustworthy. But that didn't make much of a difference to Kin, who couldn't help but stare at the woman's breasts. See something you like, dear? Asked Kaobi, raising an eyebrow. Kin blinked as her eyes went from the beautiful woman's breasts to her eyes. She blinked in surprise several more times before the words registered in her ears. When they did, Kin blushed, her face taking on a deep red hue. Even her ears and neck began to turn red. If she gained any more color, Kin was sure her head would spontaneously combust. Kaobi actually snickered a little as she watched the girl's face turn red. Now, if you're done staring at my chest, perhaps we could get a move on and I can take you to Konoha. Naruto-sama wants me to get you there within the next few days. It took a few seconds, but at hearing the name of the man who had rescued her, Kin managed to get her blush under control. She looked at Kaobi for a second as her mind registered the title the redhead had given to the blonde. Naruto-sama. The honorific the woman had used made Kin pause. The use of suffixes had long been a tradition in the elemental nations, while some had disregarded the practice in the last 50 years or so, most still used them. Use of the sama suffix often referred to one of a much higher rank than others. Usually, people who were of royalty or noble status, the leaders of a village such as a kage or mayor, were the ones who were called by such a respectful honorific. The redhead's use of the sama suffix surprised her, mainly because Naruto was not royalty as far as she knew. It meant the redhead, who Kin had actually assumed was royalty herself because of her beauty and magnificent warrior-like outfit, held a great amount of respect for the blonde. That is what you will be calling him as well, Kaobi said, standing up from the seat she had taken. She tossed the raven-haired girl a pair of simple black pants, black shirt and a beige traveling poncho with a hood over it. Kin grabbed the clothes, blinking as she examined the fabrics. They were unlike anything she had ever seen. The fabric was so soft and felt almost like silk to touch. Yet at the same time she could feel how sturdy it was. She wasn't sure what they were, and while she didn't have much of a fashion sense, she could tell these clothes were above the quality of anything else she was likely to find. The fabric of those clothes are very special, Kaobi said, directing the young girl's attention from the clothing to her. Not only are they nearly indestructible, but on the off chance that you do get any rips or tears in them, channeling your chakra through them will fix these right up. The clothes had actually been commissioned by Naruto before he had left for the human world after his training in Makai had finished. When he had first gone to Hiseki and asked for him to make clothing that relied on chakra to fix it, rather than Yuki. It had been a surprising request and not one Hiseki would have normally taken, mainly because like most demons he had no love for humanity. However, when both the descendant of Raizen and Kaobi herself were the ones making the request, there was just no way he could say no. So cool, Kin muttered. Grabbing at the clothing she was about to begin putting it on, then she remembered Kaobi standing beside her. She turned, red in the face and was about to tell the redhead to leave. Only to blink when she saw that Kaobi was already gone, the door shutting closed with a light click. Kin stared at the door for a few seconds longer before getting out of bed. She wobbled a little, having been comatose for nearly a week and then confined to a bed for another few days. The level of physical fitness she had aspired to wasn't what it had been. Wincing a little, Kin used what strength she had to get dressed and then walked towards the door. Opening it, she saw Kaobi standing on the other side, arms crossed and tapping a foot against the floor. When she noticed Kin was ready, she raised an eyebrow and asked, "Ready?" Kin nodded and Kaobi turned around. "Good, I was getting tired of waiting for you. Now let's go." Kin nodded again and followed Kaobi to what would be her new life. Birth of the new Demon King. With Naruto, Tanzakugai. Naruto looked around Tanzakugai in interest. You definitely couldn't say it wasn't a lively town. The city was very large, with a wall surrounding it and a large castle located on the south side. There were tons of adults, mainly men, bustling around the entire city. This was because Tanzakugai was a city well known for its gambling parlors, casinos, pubs and women. One of the many pleasurable services the lucrative city possessed were the many beautiful women who worked at the bars and pubs in Tanzaku that offered themselves at a price. Naruto noticed that for every shop, restaurant or hotel, there was a brothel right next to it. It reminded Naruto of the red light district he lived in, except without the complete scum and high crime ratings. Okay, Shino, do your thing. Naruto watched as his bug-using teammate began to discreetly send out his Kaichu bugs into the city. It would take somewhere around an hour for Shino to seed the whole city with his bugs, but once he had the Aburame air would be able to find and differentiate between all of the chakra signatures in Tanzakugai. Hana, Naruto said, turning to the Inuzuka and her 3 ninken. He gave her a scroll that he had grabbed from his pocket. That contains the article of clothing with Tsunade's scent. I believe you know what to do with it. Of course, Hana said while the Heimaru Senkyodai all barked and wagged their tails, as if agreeing with their partner. Grabbing the scroll she unsealed the contents, which emitted a puff of smoke that soon cleared away. What kind of sick pervert would have a pair of Tsunade-sama's panties? Asked Hana as she held up a small purple thong, her eyebrows twitching violently. Ero Senin, Naruto groaned, face palming. Of course, I should have known that damned pervert would have something like this. Blinking in confusion, the blonde had a thought occur to him. Wait a second, how in the hell did Ero Senin even get these? Tsunade is known to be absurdly violent against perverts, and I heard she almost killed him once just for peeking on her. Who is this Ero Senin? Asked Shino. Naruto turned to look at his Aburame teammate, blinking for a moment. Oh, his face gained a look of recognition. I forgot that you guys wouldn't know who he is. I was talking about Jiraiya. Wait, do you mean Jiraiya-sama? Asked Shikamaru, his eyes actually opening in shock. Of the Densetsu no Senin. That's the one, Naruto replied dryly. He also happens to be the world's largest pervert and author of the Ika Ika Paradise books that Kakashi loves so much. The guy was such a large pervert that he had more or less abandoned his godson to the wolves that called themselves Konoha citizens so he could peep on women in the hot spring and write his perverted novels. Though Naruto had to admit he liked the novels, they had given him many ideas that he and Kaobi had tried during his 1-month training in Makai. And last night. I had not known he was the author of those books, Shino said. Since he is the sensei of your father, I assume you know him well, Uzumaki-san. Not really, Naruto said with a sigh. Aside from his perverted tendencies, the only 2 things I know about him are that he's my Two-san's sensei, and my Kyofu. Anyways, let's get going. Hana, do you have a scent? I do, but it's muddled, Hana said. She looked at her 3 dogs, they were wagging their tails and barking as they sniffed the ground. After a few minutes of sniffing, they looked up at her and whined. Sighing, she shook her head. There are too many scents to properly follow it. And I think it's being masked by something. Like scent killers or something else. Right, Naruto sighed. This would make finding Tsunade that much harder. They could still find her using Shino's Kikaichu tracking, but that would take longer. Even if they could pinpoint the woman's location, finding her within such a large crowd would be difficult. Then there was the fact that even if they did, she could slip away entirely unnoticed. Naruto couldn't power his way through this kind of situation. There was no enemy to fight and overcome like with Orochimaru or his tangle with the 4S rank ninja at Otofugangai. Here it was all about stealth, intelligence gathering and recon. And Tsunade had 50 years experience in being a ninja over them. Though Naruto was still confident in his abilities to track her, while his skills may be a bit rusty as he had not pulled a prank, his talents in stealth were legendary among the Anbu. Uzumaki-san, I have found 2 strong chakra signatures, Shino informed everyone. He tilted his head, allowing a ray of sun to hit them. One is around the same level one felt from 3 of the ninja you faced, while the other is probably around the level of your average Jonin. Lead the way, Naruto said, gesturing for Shino to take the lead. The bug-using shinobi led them all to a large gambling parlor. It was quite a bit more extravagant than the others in the area, with a large neon sign in front and flashing lights all around it. Truth be told, Naruto thought it looked pretty tacky, but who was he to complain? So this is the place. Shino nodded. Yes. Alright, you guys know the plan, Naruto said. Shikamaru, create a parameter in case Tsunade tries to escape. Shino, you stay with Shikamaru. Leaning down, he grinned at the 3 dogs. I want you 3 to stay with them as well. Hana, you're with me. Hana blinked, What do you need me to be with you for? Birth of the new Demon King. A few days later, Konoha. I spy with my little eye. Not this again, Azumo groaned and held his hand in his face. Come on man, just knock it off. You've been trying to get me to play this game for hours already. It's not like there's anything better to do, Katetsu complained. All we do is sit around here watching this stupid gate, and nothing ever happens around here. It's not like some dangerous S-rank ninja is going to be walking right in through the front gates or anything. You know, considering we just had an invasion a few weeks ago, I'm not sure you should be talking about something like that happening, Azumo said. You might jinx it. Jinx SMHIX. No one in their right mind would attack us now, Katetsu replied with certainty. I mean, not only did we come out of this invasion nearly unscathed save some cosmetic damage, but we also got our Yondaime Hokage back. And we have his son. No one would be stupid enough attack us. Hey, you alright man? Asked Azumo after his friend trailed off uncertainly. He looked at his friend whose eyes were glazed over. The spiky-haired man was also blushing and drooling like an idiot. Hey, Katetsu. Katetsu. Snap out of it man. Azumo snapped in front of Katetsu's face, getting nothing more than a single blink. Excuse me. At hearing the very feminine and sensual voice, Azumo turned, and found himself in the same stupor his partner was. Standing in front of him was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. With long red hair, ruby-colored eyes that were even more exotic than Kurenai's, luscious red lips, large, firm breasts, slim waist and mile-long legs. She was everything a woman should be. I was hoping I could get signed in, the woman said, pointing towards the clipboard in Azumo's hand. That is what I need to do in order to enter Konoha, right? Alright, Azumo said dumbly. Behind him Katetsu nodded his head. Kaobi smiled as she grabbed the clipboard from Azumo's numb grasp and began filling out the proper forms needed for 2 civilians entering Konoha. Once finished she handed the clipboard back to Azumo, who took it out of sheer instinct. Thank you, Kaobi said, standing back up. She looked behind her. Come. The redhead walked past the 2 chunin in the guard booth, leaving the 2 guards in an utter stupor. The pair walked down the streets of Konoha, and everywhere Kaobi went she attracted attention. The redhead just ignored it however, as she walked through the street and made her way towards the red light district. She was forced to stop as several thugs walked in front of her. Well, look at what we've got here, one of the men said with a lecherous grin. Kaobi almost wrinkled her nose as she picked up the scent of alcohol on the men, the only stench stronger than sake was piss. Not an altogether pleasant thing to smell. Whatcha doing around these parts, doll? You lost. Kaobi rolled her eyes at the remark. No I'm not lost. I know exactly where I'm going, but I can only get there if you fucktwads get lost. Ooh, looks like the chickie has some spirit. She won't have it for very long. I say we take her into an alley and have some fun with her. Then we can have fun with her friend. Kin closed in behind Kaobi and gripped her arm. Looking over at the dark-haired girl, she said, let go. I can't fight with these men with you clinging to me. Kin looked reluctant but a glare from Kaobi made her do as asked. The redhead turned back to the thugs and shot her glare at them. I hope you've enjoyed the life you've lived so far because the moment you threatened me with rape they were forfeit. The thugs all looked at each other, confused. Hey, is this broad serious? Beats me. What can she do? Let's get her. As the men began running at her Kaobi smirked. Then she disappeared. Several flashes of light appeared around the men, too many to count and too many to see. Kaobi reappeared a few seconds later, crouched down behind the men and her hand glowing with a sharp red energy. For a moment time seemed to stand still, not a soul moved nor dared breath. Then Kaobi stood up and all of the men fell down, blood gushing out of the slash wounds she created on them. Smirking, she turned back to Kin and gestured for her. Come, we're almost to Naruto-sama's. Kin quickly caught up with the redhead and stuck close. Naruto-sama lives here, she asked in a hushed voice, as if just speaking out loud would bring more goons back. In a place like this? For the moment, yes, Kaobi answered. Though not for long if she had anything to say about it. There was no way her mate, the descendant of someone she respected above all else and as a person who held her respect himself was going to be living in such a dump for long. If Naruto didn't end up moving himself, or getting his old man to find him a decent place to live, then she was going to get him a house. A nice mansion that would make even those Hyugas jealous. But for the moment getting Naruto out of this shithole would have to wait until later. She walked up to the door, which she had at least noticed looked better than when she had been sealed inside of her blonde mate, and knocked on the door. There was some shuffling from the inside before it opened and Naruto looked at her. Hey, Kaobi Haim, he said with a grin as he opened the door all of the way. I've missed you. He leaned in for a kiss, only to be met with her hand. Blinking he looked at as she gave him a smile. Naru Bunshin, as much as I love Naruto you're not really him, she said brightly. No offense, but I prefer the real thing. Okay. Huh. Kaobi's sweat dropped as she saw the Naruto clone crouched down in a corner of the room with a rain cloud hanging over his head. She decided to ignore the now depressed Bunshin as Kin entered the room. Make yourself at home while Naru Bunshin pulls himself back together. Okay, Kin said. She looked around the room before sitting down on one of the couches. It was hard and lumpy, but she ignored that in favor of looking at her surroundings. There was another knock on the door that caused her to jump. The Naruto clone seemed to magically pull himself together at the knock and walked over to open the door, and Kin looked over when she heard several voices. Hey Tu-san, what's up? A sigh came from whoever was at the door. I hope you know how hard it was to accomplish this without anyone noticing. Are you telling me that the legendary Yondaime Hokage had trouble faking the death of a single girl? Asked Naruto. Kaobi looked over at Kin when those words were said and nearly lost it when she saw the wide-eyed flabbergasted look on the raven-haired girl's face. She wondered if Kin was more shocked at hearing the Yondaime Hokage was alive, or if the Yondaime Hokage was Naruto's old man. I'm beginning to think you don't appreciate just how much I'm doing for you. Consider this making up for 13 years of not being here. I should have figured you'd hold that over me. There was a pause. She's at the new house I got for you. You got me a house. Really? At least that means I don't have to buy a house for you, Naru Bunshin, Kaobi said from her spot. At the sound of her voice, Minato walked around Naruto and over to her. He stopped just a few feet from her with an unreadable expression on his face. However, Kaobi wasn't worried. Even if Minato decided to attack her, she could stop him. Now that she had a mating mark, it was impossible for her to be sealed even if he summoned the Shinigami again to do it. Kaobi, Minato said after nearly a minute of silence. Sochi had told me about you, and how you're more or less working with him as a partner. Given his choice of words, Kaobi wondered if she knew just how close she and Naruto actually were. It was hard to tell, she had to admit. Minato had a mean poker face. I want you to know that the only reason I'm trusting you is because my Sochi trusts you. That's fine, Kaobi said with a shrug. Your trust isn't something I really care about. Naruto-sama's demon blood may be active, but yours is still so weak I can only feel it as a pinprick of energy. As I said to Naruto-sama, I don't really care for humanity. The only reason I am willing to even help out around here is because Naruto-sama sees more worth in keeping Konoha alive than seeing it decimated. Minato nodded as if having expected the remark. He turned back to Naruto and said, we should get going now. I don't really like that you had to live in a dump like this, and I'm not going to let you stay here if I have any say about it. Right, and besides, we still have to reintroduce Kin to her long-lost friend, Naruto said. As everyone began leaving, Kin sat there blinking, wondering what the blonde meant by his words. Come on, Kin. Kin stood up and began running towards the door. Wait up, I'm coming. Birth of the new Demon King. With Naruto, Tanzakugai. Naruto whistled as Hana walked out of the changing room of the small shop they had gone in a few minutes ago. Naruto had decided when he saw her that Hana was a rather attractive kunoichi. He may not have any interest in mating with the Inuzuka, nor did he feel the desire to be physical intimate with the woman, but there was no denying the woman's physical beauty. Like all kunoichi, she kept herself in great shape, and had the same hourglass figure many female kunoichi in their late teens to even their late 30s had. And while she wasn't as feral as her clan, there was still a distinct hint of ferocity and an alpha-like presence to her. However, with the black slinky spaghetti strap dress, which stopped just above mid-thigh, she looked even more attractive. She was also wearing a light amount of makeup, some red lipstick, and just a hint of purple eyeshadow and blush. Her hair was being worn down, instead of the ponytail, and it had a brilliant shine to it thanks to the beauty parlor he had taken her to just a few minutes ago. You, my dear, look absolutely stunning, Naruto complimented with a grin. It was nice seeing Hana's cheeks turn a lovely shade of red. Inuzuka women were not into showing off their feminine sides to anyone, and he doubted they were as crazy and feral as most rumors made them out to be. However, Naruto was sure that did not mean they neglected their own femininity, and Hana was much softer than the other Inuzuka he had seen. Do you think so? She asked, blushing as she looked at herself. Though she stayed in the same spot and her feet never left the ground, the way she moved her body and legs allowed the bottom of her dress to swish around, revealing more of her legs to Naruto. Of course I do, Naruto said. He held his hands behind his back as he walked up to her. If it weren't for the fact that you're Kiba's sister, I would probably take you right here. A chuckle escaped him as he saw Hana's blush turn an even more lovely shade of red. He sighed, alas, I must stick to the bro code, so the sister of a friend is off limits. He absently wondered if he could actually consider Kiba friend. It was true that they had been the most similar in class. While Sasuke may have been his rival, it was Kiba who he competed against in the realm of pranking. It was something he would have to think about later, he supposed. Hana blinked at him, a sense of confusion passing through her eyes. What? Nothing for you to worry about, Naruto said dismissively. Running a hand through his hair, he looked himself over. For this mission, Naruto had chosen to wear a nice black tux with an orange tie. He had to admit that he looked rather good in a tux, even if wearing them felt constricting. He looked back at Hana and smiled. Holding out his arm, he said, "Shall we?" Hana looked at him for a moment before grabbing his arm. Together the two once again made their way to the gambling parlor Tsunade had been seen going. They had been staking out the place for 2 days, learning Tsunade's habits and having Shikamaru come up with the best plan to capture her should convincing the woman to return prove fruitless, and she made an attempt to bolt. As he stared at the door to the gambling parlor, Naruto smiled. "You ready?" he asked the Inuzuka female next to him. "As I'll ever be." Birth of the new Demon King. The room was dark, smoke was wafting through the air, emitting an acrid scent that cloyed at the throat. The smoke in the room was so thick that many actually had trouble seeing their hand in front of their face. This was the kind of room one would expect to find in a mob boss's hideout, where Yakuza members hung around and did whatever the hell they felt like. Only this was no Yakuza hideout, this was a poker tournament. One of the highest caliber, in which the amount of money being bet was enough to buy the city on the scale of Tanzakugai. Tsunade frowned as she looked at the cards in her hand. Like always, they weren't very good: 1 pair of 2s, a 5, a 9, and a jack. There wasn't much she could get with that kind of hand, and there was very little if any chance of her winning. Not like such a bad hand ever stopped her from playing anyways. "I'm all in, double or nothing," she said, pushing her nearly half of her chips into the pot. All around, the men she was betting against were laughing to themselves. Tsunade had truly proven herself to be the legendary sucker, the woman who never wins a bet of any kind. No one in their right mind would turn down a bet made by her. It was a guaranteed win for them. "Excuse me." Everyone turned at the sound of the voice. Entering the darkened room was a young man who looked to be around 18 years of age. He had long and wild-looking spiky blonde hair, blue eyes and lean features. He was rather attractive in Tsunade's opinion. If she had an itch that needed scratching at the moment, she might have even put the moves on him after the tournament. On his arm was a rather attractive young woman around the same age. She had lustrous brown hair and brown eyes with a hint of eyeshadow. Her dress accentuated her curves, though she looked more like an accessory to the centerpiece the blonde male represented. "Who are you?" asked one of the many gamblers that had been just about to accept Tsunade's double or nothing bet. "Can't you see we're in the middle of a game? Come back later, brat." "Ah, now don't be like that," the blonde male said in a condescending voice. He walked over to the table and Tsunade watched as he placed a briefcase on it. Unlocking the latches, he opened the contents and spun it around. Tsunade's, along with the jaw of everyone else currently playing the high-stakes poker game, dropped their jaws at the sight of what had to be billions of ryo worth in diamonds. "I was hoping I could get an in with this game." Tsunade eyed the young man in interest as the other gamblers conferred with each other. There was just something about him that made her feel wary. Like he was a hunter that was currently stalking its prey. The only question she could wonder was just who was his prey. After a few minutes, the men that had been conferring with each other nodded in agreement. "All right, kid, you're in. I just hope you won't mind it when we take all of those precious gems of yours." "Not at all," the blonde replied, sitting down at an empty seat at the table. The woman came up to his left and placed a hand on his shoulder, rubbing it up and down sensually. "If you can beat me, that is. Though I must warn you." His eyes flickered to Tsunade's, who flinched back. He grinned. "I've been told I have the devil's luck." Birth of the new Demon King. Back in Konoha. To Yuya, Kin shouted as soon as she had fully entered the house that Minato had procured for his son. It was built into the side of the Hokage monument by being cut out by earth ninjutsu specialists. The entrance to the place was on the top of the mountain and descended to the actual building via a stairway. The rooms were all well furnished with tasteful furniture that made the place look homey. Having never lived in a place like this, the Naruto clone decided his creator would probably like this kind of house. Huh. Tayuya looked up at the shout and found herself being held in the vice grip of Kin. "Hey, what the fuck? Get off me. Get off." "Ha ha ha, I had wondered who they were talking about," Kin said with a joyous expression on her face. "I hadn't realized you left Odo." "I hadn't, at least not in the way you're thinking," Tayuya said. She pointed over to Naruto. "Shithead over there captured me and the others and, Before she could say another word, a tail had wrapped around Tayuya's throat and picked her up. Kin let out a scream while the redhead grabbed and clawed at the tail. Only to stop when she came face to face with the other redhead in the room. "Now you listen here, you fucking twat." Kaobi spat out as the girl in her grasp shook and shivered worse than a leaf being blown around in a hurricane. "If I ever hear you refer to Naruto-sama by any other name other than Naruto-sama, I will rip your fucking spine out of your back and use it to beat you to death. I will ensure that you suffer a fate so terrible that even a demon lord would shiver in fear. Do you understand?" Tayuya's eyes bulged, not only due to lack of air, but also because of the killing intent Kaobi was blasting her with. The younger redhead could literally see herself being ripped to shreds by this girl, being impaled by Kaobi's tails before she was pulled apart. Several versions of her death flashed before her eyes, each one more gruesome than the next. So frightening were these deaths and the killing intent that came with it that Tayuya actually lost control of her bladder. Kaobi growled when the girl didn't answer her. She was just about to squeeze harder when a hand was placed on her shoulder. Turning her head, Kaobi made to snarl at the person who dared touch her. However, when she saw that it was Naruto's clone, she just blinked. Put her down, Kaobi-hime, he said calmly. I really don't want to have to deal with any violence right now, especially since I would like her alive. Kaobi's mouth opened in surprise. But she just called you. I know what she called me, Naruto said, interrupting the woman from talking. She called me that the moment she saw me enter her hospital room after the invasion. But that doesn't matter. What does is that if you keep putting out that much killing intent, the seals that are designed around this place to keep our energy levels concealed will collapse, and then all of Konoha will be in a panic. I have better control of my Yuki and killing intent than that, Kaobi said with a huff. Despite her words, Kaobi's power and killing intent began dwindling. But you do have a point. Best not leave things to chance. She then turned on the redhead still in the grasp of one of her tails and glared at her. However, you will refer to Naruto-sama as I told you. I will not have some pathetic ninja call my mate by such a disrespectful title. Do you understand? Tayuya quickly nodded, her eyes showing more fear than they ever had during her time working for Orochimaru. Good. Kaobi said the girl down and then walked out of the room, likely to keep herself from blowing up. Kin ran up to her friend after the backlash from Kaobi's killing intent that kept her in place had disappeared. Sorry about that, Naruto said, sighing a bit. She can be a bit of a handful. You're telling me, Tayuya hacked, holding a hand to her abused throat as she coughed. Who the hell is that? And what was up with the tail? That would be Kaobi, Naruto said, grinning at the reaction he got from Tayuya. Kin had been informed by Kaobi herself a few days ago, so the news didn't shock her. And before you ask, no, she was not killed by Maitu-san, she was sealed, and yes, she is out of the seal, and no, she won't kill you unless you piss her off. Stay on her good side and you'll have nothing to worry about. Tayuya snapped her mouth shut when the blonde answered the questions she had just been about to ask. Now down to why you're both here, Naruto said as he sat down on a couch. Kin and Tayuya took the other one, and Naruto noticed that Kin was sitting awfully close to the redhead. Guessing that she was still uncomfortable around men, he decided to get to the point. I want you both to work for me. Said Kin, scratching the back of her head. What do you mean, Naruto-sama? Tayuya gave Kin an incredulous stare, but the raven-haired girl ignored it as she looked at Naruto. What I mean is I want you two, to work for me, he reiterated, pointing to each of them in turn. I doubt either of you know as Orochimaru was never one to trust others, but he was once the member of a group of S-rank criminals called Akatsuki. Apparently my Kyofu, Jiraiya, managed to find out about them while tracking his teammates' movements. We don't know exactly what their endgame is, but we know what they want. The 9 Demon Lords, or if you want to go by their human title, the Biju. Recently the original Naruto had a run-in with a few of the Akatsuki's members in Otofugangai. He managed to drive them off relatively easily. Well, if he beat them so fucking easily, then what the fuck does he need us for? Asked Tayuya. I suggest you learn to watch your tongue, Kaobi said as she re-entered the room. Tayuya paled as she turned her head to look at her fellow redhead, who happened to be glaring at her. While this Naruto may be a clone, I won't have you address him with such disrespect. You will curb your choice of words, or I will remove your tongue. Tayuya gulped, but nodded and vowed never to get on the redhead's bad side. The reason I need your help is because while I may be equipped to deal with the Akatsuki, none of the other Jinchuriki are, Naruto said. As I understand it, the members of Akatsuki are each chosen specifically because their powers give them a leg up over a Jinchuriki. What they lack in raw power they make up for in cunning, and even a Jinchuriki who has completely mastered their Biju can only use so much of it before it kills them through poisoning. Humans simply weren't made to handle the energy of a demon. What I need is for you two to be my eyes in the world outside of Hai no Kuni. Because of my growing reputation from the invasion, and now that my status as the Yondaime's son is known, traveling outside of Hai no Kuni will be difficult without getting into a lot of fights. And while I enjoy kicking ass as much as the next guy, I don't want to be responsible for slaughtering an entire brigade Iwa ninja just because they wanted to get revenge on my father through killing me. So you want us to spy for you? Asked Kin. More like I want you to find all of the Jinchuriki, Naruto corrected. I want to know who they are, and if you can find out more about them as a person. What kind of people are they? What do they like? What do they hate? Anything you feel would prove useful. And what do we get out of this? Asked Tayuya with a skeptical gaze. How about your life? Said Kaobi with a slight growl. Naruto put a hand in front of her and she turned away with a huff. As much as I hate to admit it, Kaobi is partially correct, Naruto said. Should you work for me, you will be allowed to live. However, as you know at least some of what I want, should you choose not to, I will either have to erase your memory, which is very hard to do, or kill you. Both Kin and Tayuya gulped. However, you will also gain benefits from working for me that won't get anywhere else. At those words, the two former Oto Kunoichi perked up. The first is specialized training that will put you on par with any Jonin in less than a year. The second is the freedom to move across the elemental nations without restrictions. The third is being under my protection from anyone who may seek to harm you, should you require it. How would we get that second one? Asked Kin. Getting unlimited freedom to move across the world was very hard to do. The reason was because each country required a different form of passport. Even a civilian can't cross the borders of one country and into another without the proper passports. It was even harder for a shinobi, if not outright impossible. Thanks to Jiraiya's spy network, we've been able to create passports for each nation, Naruto said. They're not fakes, but actual passports that were created by using a fourth party to buy them from each country, and a third party to send them through various channels and dead ends that make it impossible for anyone to realize you would have them. And because your faces are only known by Konoha and Oto, and neither of you are in the bingo book, it won't be very hard for either of you to slip past most patrols without a problem. What about Konoha though? Said Kin. They know our face. Naruto smirked. They do, but Tayuya died in the hospital due to a heart failure caused by the cursed seal being removed upon Orochimaru's death. And you, Kin, disappeared after the Chunin exams. No one knows where you went and so assumed you died as well. While you two may look familiar, there's no possible way either of you could be Tsuchi-kin or Tayuya. I get where this is going, Tayuya said slyly. You're a sneaky bastard, you know that. I do try. So do you two agree? Asked Kaobi, interrupting them so they could get things underway. Not like we have much choice, Tayuya said with a shrug. We're in. Naruto smiled. Alright, we'll begin training soon. I've actually got my old man in the process of building an underground training ground several miles outside of Konoha. When it is complete, that is where you will stay until your training is over. Why underground? Asked Kin. So no one can find you, of course, Naruto said with a grin, which turned decidedly evil a second later. Plus it would be a bitch if people started sensing Kaobi's Yuki when she began training you. Both Kin and Tayuya went pale as they turned to see Kaobi giving them a smile that was so sweet they knew it couldn't be real. The terrifying moment was broken, however, when Minato, who had been silent up to this point, suddenly asked, what did Kaobi mean when she called you her mate? Birth of the new Demon King. With Naruto, Tanzakugai. The smile never left Naruto's face as he was dealt another hand of cards. From the moment he had entered the room, the blonde Uzumaki had been dominating the poker match. Out of the 15 rounds that had passed, he had only lost 2, and now the stack of chips in his possession was the quadruple the amount it had been. 5 of the 7 original players had also been forced to fold, having lost all of their money and in one case the clothes on his back. I fold, the last male player besides him had said. He tossed his cards on the table and got up. Looks like it's just you and me, Naruto said, turning to Tsunade with a smile. Behind him Hana was practically hanging on him. She leaned over and kissed his cheek for good luck as the next match began. He couldn't help but think the Inuzuka was playing her role perfectly. So it seems, Tsunade commented warily. Had it not been for the fact that it would ruin his poker face, Naruto would have laughed. Throughout the entire tournament he had been playing with her in small ways. Not to make her slip, Tsunade's luck was so bad she would never need it. But so that he could gauge her reactions, and he had to admit it was kind of fun watching her squirm. At first it was just light flirting, a compliment here, a slight innuendo there. It wasn't hard. Tsunade was a beautiful woman, at least when in her henge. She was a fairly tall, light-skinned woman with light brown eyes and straight blonde hair. Her hair is waist-length with shoulder-length bangs framing both sides of her face, and was tied in 2 loose ponytails in the back. She had a slender yet noticeably curvaceous frame, and if Jiraiya were to be believed she had 106 cm breast circumference, which was the equivalent of a DD-sized chest. Possibly the oddest thing about her was the purple rhombus on the center of her forehead. Her outfit consisted of a grass-green robe with the kanji for gamble, do, cake written in black on the back, inside a red circle. Underneath she wore a gray, kimono-style blouse with no sleeves, held closed by a broad, dark bluish-gray obi that matches her pants. Her blouse was closed quite low, revealing her sizable cleavage. She had on open-toed sandals with high heels and polish on both her fingernails and toenails. She also had on a soft pink lipstick. And finally, Naruto saw the Shodai Hokage's necklace in clear view on her chest. Beauty aside, Naruto wasn't dumb enough to say anything of an overtly sexual nature. He knew she hated perverts thanks to Jiraiya, so he made sure to keep his comments low-key. Not enough to insult and just enough to fluster and entice her. It helped that he knew she found him attractive. He would have to thank Kaobi for helping him understand women when he got home. I would like to up the wages, Tsunade, Naruto said as he placed 2 cards from his hand face down on the table. The dealer gave him 2 more cards and he looked at them with a slight smile. Never one to back down from a high-stakes gamble, Tsunade asked. I take it you have something special in mind. Naruto watched her take 3 cards from the dealer with a smile. You could say that. Should you win this next hand, I will offer to pay off every single one of your debts and you won't owe me a dime. Tsunade's eyes widened. Her debt had to be running somewhere around 2 billion ryo by now. Only a daimyo possibly had enough money to pay off that kind of debt. For anyone to say they would pay off that much of her debt, especially in the nonchalant tone he had used, was inconceivable. She quickly regained her composure. And if I lose? The smile Naruto gave her was considerably predatory as he said, if you lose, you will come back to Konoha with me.